Release that witch eye by Ermu. Chapter 981, Unexpected Start. Morning light climbed to the top of the slope and his heart raced as he watched the busy but well-organized battlefield in front of him. This was not the first time he has been on the battlefield. At the age of 15, he was already an excellent knight squire, following the lord during the charges. When he became an adult, he even won the reputation of the first knight of the western region. He was no stranger to war. However, the atmosphere here was completely different. Before the battle, nobles would motivate, promise rewards, eat and drink in order to improve the army's morale. That is why the freemen and mercenary camps would often immerse themselves with wild cheers, similar to an open market with the only difference being the absence of wine. At such occasions, knights would always laugh at their men for being so oblivious of a few breadcrumbs, not knowing they would have to sacrifice themselves for it. At that time, Eltek also believed that only nobles knew the art of war. Without a noble leading them, freemen would lack cohesion, just like scattered sand. Only when Duke Ryan was defeated at Border Town by a bunch of miners did he realize that the reality was different from what he imagined. However, since he was satisfied with achieving his revenge, he did not think about it further and instead devoted his energy to his wife Irene. 2 years later, thanks to his father, Morning Light joined the advisor department only to find out that the war has completely changed. The First Army's discipline during the last month's march has already astonished him, and yet, the professionalism they displayed right now would make most of the nobility feel ashamed. Without any agitation, everyone was familiar with their tasks. At the bottom of the slope, several trenches had been excavated, while the excavated soil was put into sacks and piled up to form rows of simple walls in front of the machine gun area. In the middle of the trenches, there were wired iron nets and chevaux de frise which were assembled on spot. Achieving a frontal breakthrough would be almost as hard as breaching through a city wall. Many cushion areas had also been set up behind the defensive line so that even if the machine guns were breached, they would not lose the battle. The Tequila Witches could both protect the artillery battalion and provide support for the front line at any time as backup troops. The slope that was the furthest behind was the core of the First Army's attack, 6 Longsong cannons, pointing straight at the demon's outpost. The cannon soldiers were reviewing the shooting parameters, making the final preparations for the upcoming assault. All of this did not need to be arranged by a commander, but instead, in just one day, the First Army turned this area into an adequate battlefield. Roland had seen the power of the new firearms during the cannon demonstration, but still, they were only machines. The operators of the weapons had to be humans. Moreover, it was exactly those freeman soldiers who really surprised him. A platoon with such strict discipline and clear division of labor was hard to be assembled even by the knightage of the great nobles. Even though he had previously seen the change in the people of Neverwinter, that was still nothing compared to his shock right now. "Do you understand now?" Suddenly, Morning Light heard a familiar voice behind him. The answer to that question before. Roland turned around and nodded at Sir Eltek. "Yes, Father." When His Majesty announced that he wanted to unify Grey Castle within a month and attack Hermes and the Kingdom of Dawn simultaneously, the advisor department did not have any objections but instead devised a number of seemingly incomprehensible plans. The reason behind that was these weapons and soldiers. Thanks to them, no one in the mainland was his enemy, or rather, the strength of the enemies could no longer be compared with his. Unfortunately, His Majesty forbade nobles to join the army. Roland said regretfully, "Compared to sitting in an office, I would rather experience fighting alongside those people. Individual braveness is no longer so important. The advisor department suits you more," his father smiled. "Besides, it's a battle with unknown enemies such as demons, so what if something happened? I am still waiting for a grandson. Irene's friend recently gave birth, I think. You should try harder too." "Father." Roland could not help but hold his forehead. Fine, I won't talk about it," said Eltek while stroking his beard. "The sun is about to set, let's go back to the camp. The artillery battalion will start firing soon, can't stand that noise." Yes, Morning Light looked at the camp one last time and then went down the hill with his father. He also had another battlefield to attend to and finish his duties. At 5 in the evening, the cannon started firing. According to the previously adjusted shooting angles, the 6 cannons started firing one by one, breaking the silence of the fertile plains. 400 years later, humans have once again stepped into these plains, launching an assault at the demons. The first 2 rounds were to test and fix any discrepancies that might occur, and after they received Sylvie's feedback, the cannon sounds became synchronized. The improved 152mm Longsong cannon was a bit closer to its historical predecessor. In order to increase the shooting range, the ammunition chamber was doubled and the shells had to be filled part by part. So, the shooting time was also increased by half. However, driven by the higher pressure, these cannons could cause a fatal threat to fixed targets even 10 kilometers away. Because of the increase in length, the weight was also affected, thus bringing more trouble for the logistics. The final solution was to dismantle the cannons into 4 pieces and carry them with the tequila worm carrier. Nobody could hear the sounds or see the flames that occurred when a shell landed. This was an entirely new form of war. If not for the several cannon battles that they had already fought, the soldiers would never believe that they could destroy the enemy's strongholds and cities just by a few repetitive moves, even without the need to face the enemy. There were mainly 2 reasons for choosing to launch an attack at sunset. Firstly, the effect of the Eye of Magic did not rely on sunlight and could also be used at night to guide the artillery team's shooting. Secondly, the devil beasts could not move at night. The demons had no choice but to bear their attacks all night. The Longsong cannon would shoot every 2 minutes, but other than the sounds made beyond the skyline, it seemed as if there were no changes at the battlefield in the middle of the night. On the other hand, in Sylvie's eyes, the landscape 10 kilometers away had completely changed. Due to the explosive waves, the landscape was turned over and dozens of black stone pagodas were mostly destroyed. In particular, when the shells went through the mist storage tower, the explosion that followed made the black stones look like an eruptive volcano. Yet, she still has not discovered the whereabouts of the demons. Until the early morning of the next day, when everyone assumed that the enemy had abandoned their outpost, the situation suddenly changed. A large group of demons appeared in the north of the First Army's camp, 8 kilometers away from the northbound slope. At the same time, Sylvie also saw dozens of devil beasts moving. The enemy, that had gone missing for several days, was now coming towards them. Chapter 982, Unplanned War. What is going on? In the central tent, the atmosphere in the air was rather heavy. The Commander-in-Chief Iron Axe was staring at the map on the long table, frowning. There is neither a red mist supply line nor a warning sign. It is as if all these demons appeared out of thin air. They raised the alarm as quickly as possible and the platoons of the First Army were already in position, but still, there was a feeling of confusion and insecurity within everyone's mind. And this happened during Sylvie's surveillance. How would they fight this war without the witches? If the enemy was capable of suddenly appearing 8 kilometers away, then what would happen if they suddenly appeared in their camp next time? If this question was not answered, nobody would be able to calm down. Outside the tent, the Longsong cannon started firing again after going quiet for half of the night. Additionally, the rate of firing was increased to maximum. It was no longer necessary to save shells, since the most important thing now was to reduce the enemy's strength as soon as possible. It's impossible that they appeared out of nowhere, Agatha said firmly. The red mist is essential for the survival of the demons, this hasn't changed. If that wasn't the case, they would have already taken over the world. The enemy's number is now close to 10,000, and without the red mist supply line, just by running towards here would result in their death, let alone fighting. According to previous intelligence, the outpost here can sustain at most few thousand demons, Iron Axe said after a while. So what you are saying is that there is another supply line near us which was not discovered by the Eye of Magic? This is the only possible answer. No, there is one more possibility, Edith interrupted. Since we are able to make the supply line disappear from the surface, the demons may have also been able to think of that. Digging an underground tunnel from Tequila to here? Agatha shook her head. Without taking into consideration whether or not they have acquired a worm carrier, The construction of a tunnel that would enable the demons to move around is no small task, and it conflicts with the time of their first appearance at Tequila. Furthermore, such a huge activity should have been spotted by Sylvie. I am not saying that they started from your hometown, Edith stretched and pointed on an X mark on the map. What if they only started from the outpost? What do you mean? Iron Axe asked with a deep voice. Don't you think that the location of the demon's appearance is a bit awkward? She pulled up her dangling hair and continued, think about it, if we were a traditional army, without regard to if we were human nobles or Union witches, what would be the situation? Following the question of the Pearl of the Northern region, everyone turned their eyes on the map. From those who could enter the central big tent, some were members of the advisor department, some were commanders of the army, and some were representatives of the Allied forces, but none of them showed slow reactions. Soon, everyone thought of a possibility. In an instant, there was a sound of astonishment in the big tent. The sound of their sighs was soon covered by the cannon firing outside of the tent, but under the shaking of the ground, everyone could see the surprise in each other's eyes. Only when the firing stopped, Morning Light finally broke the silence and said, "Are you saying that the outpost is a trap set by the demons? If they were a traditional army, they would have to start a siege in order to destroy the outpost, and that would mean exposing their back to the demons. So, if the demons appeared at that time, they would form a natural surrounding with the ruins of Tequila. So, under the attack from both sides, the First Army's fate would be easy to imagine. The two opposite sides would just manage to fit in the 2-kilometer battlefield, and looking at the map, it looked exactly like a huge pocket." "So they were certain that we would come?" Iron Axe asked. Edith did not answer but looked at the ancient witch's representative, Zoe. Compared to the most of them, Zoe's expression did not really change and her face was emotionless as always. "If it was the Union, then we would definitely come. Letting the demons build an outpost would result in an expansion of the Red Line, which is suicide. The destruction of a city would always begin from the inability to stop the enemy's expansion." She paused and then said, "But they have never done this before." "Well, the times have changed." The Pearl of the Northern region waved her hands. "If that's the case, this explains a lot. The demons don't think that humans can pose a threat to a Devil Beast team, and Neverwinter is a witch city essentially, so they set up this trap. If they were lucky, they would manage to defeat all the combat witches at once. So, to make us come, not only did they not attack us en route but also decreased their surveillance area on purpose, all of it leading up to this moment now. What do you all think of this assumption? Even if this is true, how were the demons able to hide from Miss Sylvie's observation?" Sir Eltec asked, confused. "You may not know this, but her ability is not omniscient," Edith replied. "If I remember correctly, there is a considerable gap between her observation distance and her perspective distance. Hence, taking into consideration the Devil Beast, she is usually only able to observe at a limited distance. Under these circumstances, the Eye of Magic has probably omitted a large area." Hearing this, everyone could already guess the answer. "Of course, I'm not blaming Miss Sylvie," Edith sighed, "it's just that we relied too much on her magic power. It was a problem that could not be neglected by the witches. In order to observe what the enemies were doing, Sylvie had to stay alert all the time and carefully plan the usage of her magic power. But the observation of the deep layers of the ground required a huge amount of magic power, just like a bird watching from the sky far above. That is why it was impossible to check every place on the fertile plains in detail. Assuming the demons can only hide near the red mist area, she must have checked only the area near the outpost, and limited by the observation distance, the depth of observation would not have been too deep either." Agatha frowned. "We can verify this point right now." She then activated the sigil of listening. "Sylvie, can you check what's happening underneath the army of demons?" "Underground?" Sylvie, who was guiding the cannons at that time, was a little startled. "I can try, but my magic power—" "It's all right." "Got it." The voice on the other side of the sigil stopped for a moment, and then everyone heard her surprised voice. "This is strange. The magic eye's line of sight has been blocked. I can't see anything. There is only darkness underground." Everyone remained silent. This result had indirectly proved Edith's assumption. Being tricked by the enemy was definitely not a good feeling. For a moment, the only sound in the tent was the firing of the cannons. Pow, pow, pow. At this time Iron Axe suddenly clapped his hands. "Lord?" Morning Light asked. "If this is the case, then I can rest assured," he said slowly. "In the end, the following tough battle will decide who the prey is." "You are right, Lord Commander-in-Chief," Edith smiled. Though they did not guess their opponent correctly, the result is still the same. Both sides can be considered lucky. Or maybe, we are luckier. To confront the enemy head-to-head in a carefully planned battlefield is exactly what we want, isn't it? They didn't have a chance to react to the bombing last night, and now not only have they lost their bait but also have to face our fully prepared soldiers. No matter how you look at it, the situation isn't too bad. The Pearl of the Northern region paused for a moment. Actually, just like what I said at the beginning, we don't need to concern ourselves with the intentions of our enemy. No matter what they want to do, we just need to kill off anyone who dares to come in front of us. That's exactly what the First Army is good at, isn't it? At this time, the alarm sounded once again in the camp in a much more urgent manner. Air attack warning. Everyone understood, they were here. The Devil Beast, being the front-line platoon, had already entered the shooting range of the First Army. Chapter 983, A Fierce Attack. "Well then, I'm taking off," Agatha announced solemnly. "Off you go." A cold sneer broke across Zoe's face. "We've been waiting for this day for too long." Unlike the First Army, the commanders of the ancient witches were also powerful combatants. They would be the last to retreat when demons were approaching. "Ms. Agatha, Ms. Zoe," Iron Axe suddenly stopped them. "Is there anything else? Although I shouldn't say this, I think this must be what His Majesty wanted to convey to you," he said thoughtfully. "Please stay safe. Your being alive is the heaviest blow we can inflict on the demons." "Haha, I won't die so easily before reclaiming Tequila." Zoe turned around and cast Iron Axe a glance. "Thanks for your kind words. I do appreciate it, mortal. Don't worry. We know what to do." Smiling, Agatha walked out of the tent. The sky had darkened. Compared to the defensive battle in Neverwinter last time, the number of the enemies this time increased by several times, and they flew a lot faster as well. They soon reached the very front of the battlement. The anti-aircraft guns at the front fired in succession, and in a short moment, the air was heavy with the oppressive sound of anti-aircraft fire. However, the attack was far from effective. Out of over 60 devil beasts, only 4 or 5 were shot down. The other demons, on the other hand, climbed even higher. "Those freaking bastards, they're so annoying." Zoe was distraught. "I could crush them with my hands the moment they dare to land." In the Union Age, the best way to counterattack these monsters was to send out combat witches and extraordinaries who carried a stone of flight. This was also the reason the ancient witches took armies of mortal men so lightly. Without the witches' help, a few devil beasts would be more than enough to disperse an army. Why aren't they throwing their spears? Watching the enemies hovering above, Agatha frowned. But the next moment she immediately knew the demons' real intention. The mounted demons dived for the rear of the defensive line, exactly where the artillery battalion was located. Agatha and Zoe exchanged a look before instantly to the artillery's position. Fishball was responsible for the central area of the battlement. Because of his meritorious performance in the battle against the demons last time, he had been promoted to unit leader. Although it was not his first time seeing these monsters, the scene of hordes of devil beasts attacking him still sent a chill down his spine. "You unit leader, shouldn't we fire?" The team member with an ammunition sack in his hand stammered out. "They're within 900 meters. The lookout went livid in terror, his Adam's apple quivering. Fishball realized that everyone was scared. Even the most courageous of people would be truly terrified in the presence of such an unimaginable onslaught of enemies. Because of the permeating fear, Fishball knew he had to stay cool. Otherwise, they would collapse before the enemy attack even arrived. At this thought, Fishball swallowed hard and tried to speak slower. "Just hang in there. Fire when they're within 300 meters. Although the machinery instructor told them that the shooting range of Mark I type HMG exceeded 1,500 meters and that its scope range was around 1,000, Fishball learned from his personal experience that they could only hit targets within said range when devil beasts were flying steady and straight. The best shooting method was to directly use a concentric ring to noose the enemy based on instincts, rather than taking aim with the scope perched on top. A poor firing accuracy would undoubtedly affect the soldier's morale. He preferred to shoot when the result was guaranteed. Nevertheless, the short distance between the battlement and the enemies also meant that the latter could launch a counterattack anytime. Fishball sincerely hoped that the additional baffle plate in front of the machine gun was durable enough to stop the demons. They dived. The lookout screamed. Now. Fishball pulled the trigger. He could see a stream of bullets whoosh through the air and crumble the gigantic figure that dashed forward. The devil beast at the very front, who had been hit by at least a dozen bullets from various directions, instantly turned into a cloud of bloody mist. The mad demon mounting on its back was no better, its skull cracked open, and legs slashed in half. Its figure was almost indiscernible as it plummeted to the ground. The death of the enemy exhilarated the soldiers who cheered at their first victory, which injected courage into Fishball. He immediately aimed at another devil beast that died in the same way as the previous one a few seconds later. When Fishball was about to redouble his efforts, the surroundings suddenly darkened. The sun seemed to be overspread by a grayish curtain, specking the battlement here and there with flickers of light. When Fishball realized what the curtain really was, his heart stopped with a horror-filled jerk. "They're spearing!" he yelled at the top of his lung. "Watch out!" However, numerous spears pelted down and they had nowhere to hide. The only thing they could do was duck behind their shields, leaving their exposed hands and feet to fate. Fishball held his companion tight, whilst bracing himself to be penetrated by a bone spear. But the clash he had been anticipating did not come. With a gust of wind, the light was restored. "You unit leader, behind!" someone exclaimed in surprise. Fishball looked over his shoulder, his heart pounding in his chest, and saw the battlement behind him was a mess. The air was permeated with dust created by the spearing attack. Some were lying on the ground, unconscious, whereas some wounded soldiers were moaning and calling for help in the midst of the smog. The 6 Longsong cannons had all stopped firing. Everybody swallowed hard. "What are you waiting for?" Fishball gnawed his teeth and snarled. "Get back to your position and continue to fire." There would be someone else responsible for the provision of first aid and sending reinforcements. What he needed to do now was to shoot down as many devil beasts as possible, before the enemies launched their second attack. The bellow jerked the soldiers out of their trance. The 2 anti-aircraft machine guns thundered once more. Meanwhile, the demons also realized that spearing alone would not completely stop their opponents. Therefore, they divided the devil beasts into 2 groups, one climbing higher to wait for the next round of attacks, while the other dealt directly with the soldiers on the ground through hand-to-hand combat, taking advantage of their superior physical strength. One mad demon dismounted and encountered a man with black hair. Apparently, it did not take male human being very seriously, for it casually drew the iron axe from around its waist and flailed it at him blankly. However, the man stopped his blow with only one hand. Eyes wide open, the mad demon did not even have time to think about what had happened before he saw his enemy aiming an iron tube at him. Wham! His Majesty's new weapon is good indeed. Zoe released the demon who collapsed instantly, a big hole in the latter's chest. If we had this 400 years ago, Tequila probably wouldn't have fallen, and the 3 chiefs wouldn't have turned against each other because of disagreements on the continuity of the human race. She walked to the unconscious demon and crushed its skull beneath her foot before casting it a cold glance. "But we're still alive and have returned with vengeance. Now, it's time for you to pay for what you've done." Chapter 984, A Furious Roar. Ugh, Banner scrambled to his feet. After confirming that his body and limbs were still in one piece, he breathed a sigh of relief. But his heart soon sank the next moment. Many people close to the Longsong cannons had been penetrated by bone spears. It was hard to tell whether they were still alive. He saw some soldiers, who had been maimed by bone spears, searching for their broken limbs in the mud. Danner managed to fight back tears. The artillery battalion was one of the very first squads built and trained by His Majesty. From the beginning, when they had fought against the Duke of the Western region, all the way to the attack at Hermes, they had seldom suffered defeats. Looking at the astonishing casualties, Danner was heartbroken. But Danner knew this was not the time for him to lament the loss. The angel of the First Army, Miss Nana, was currently at the battalion's shelter. As long as the soldier sent to her was still breathing, Miss Angel would be able to heal him. "Hello, anybody out there?" Danner shouted as he crawled to one of the wounded soldiers in a critical condition who got his stomach stabbed. "Anybody help me?" "Sir, we're here." 2 soldiers came out of the smog, trotting to him. "Send him to the field hospital." Danner stuffed the intestines spilling out of the soldier's stomach back in, together with the torn pieces of flesh. "Make sure not to leave anything behind." "Yes, sir," the soldier grimaced in pain. Stop talking. If you have the strength to talk, save it to kill demons." Danner patted his cheek. "Hope you'll get better and be back soon. I'm relying on you to fire. Do you understand?" After the wounded soldier was sent away, he ran to another field medic and asked, "Did you come from the camp?" The man glanced at the badge on Danner's shoulder and saluted. "Yes, sir." "Is there anything I can do for you?" "Continue with your business. Taking care of the wounded is the top priority." Danner waved his hand. "What's it like at the front?" After the artillery suffered the attack, the battlements within 500 meters were enveloped by thick smoke. Except for the closest cannon, Danner didn't know anything about the other squads. He could only hear the patterings of running footsteps in distance, and the occasional roars of cannons and guns. He was a little surprised that there were no reinforcements at this point, even though the field medics had been called to the scene. "The demons are coming from above." The field medic answered hastily while bandaging a wounded soldier. "I just came from the central camp and saw those winged monsters land and engage the heavy infantry." "The demons landed after spearing?" In other words, the present chaos was caused by the infiltration of enemies at the rear. That was why the reserves, who were usually positioned in the central zone, were not able to approach and reinforce the Longsong cannons at the moment. It also explained why the front was still intact. Realizing this, Danner immediately understood what he should do. He must put the Longsong cannons back into operation. The enemy wanted to prevent them from firing at the approaching demons, so he must stop them. As long as the front line was not penetrated, the enemies would sooner or later be exterminated by the heavy infantry. Although Danner didn't know where His Majesty had found those warriors with such monstrous strength, who could carry weapons comparable in weight to field artillery with ease, one thing was certain: their capacity for battle was only paralleled by the ferocious demons. "I'll leave the wounded to you." Danner ran to the ammunition case that had fallen to the ground and used all his strength to pick up a shell. He then staggered to the muzzle and pushed the shell into the bore. Then he loaded the cannon. It was actually 2 people's work, but Danner finished by himself. He was out of breath by the time the cannon was loaded. Danner took a deep breath and started to adjust the firing angle based on the enemy's previous marching speed. At that moment, the field medic dashed toward him, shrieking, "Sir, behind!" In that second, Danner felt his blood freeze. Immediately, he rolled to the ground before even turning around. His instinct had saved him. With a loud clink, an axe pelted past him, ruffling his hair, and hitting the breech block, creating a series of sparks. Danner looked up and saw a mad demon glaring at him. "Grah!" The mad demon raised its axe and stomped towards him, howling. "I'm done," Danner thought to himself in despair. Although he had a sword around his waist, he could not draw it when he was on the ground. Even if he did have it in hand, it was impossible for him to block the blow, as demons were far stronger and faster than humans. As the axe got closer, Danner reached out his hand, attempting to block the strike. Crack! A wall of ice suddenly manifested between them. The axe smashed into the wall, sending ice crystals flying from its surface. Was I saved? Danner turned around in shock and saw a blue-haired witch performing a grabbing motion while watching the demon with a cool stare. She said to Vanner, "Come here, behind me." Vanner clenched his teeth. Although his legs were too shaky to support his weight, he somehow managed to get to his feet and walked to the witch. Ga, va, ka. Vanner had no knowledge of the demon's language, but he could tell that it looked murderous and furious. The demon dashed around the wall and crouched, the right arm with which it held its axe swelling rapidly. The witch, surprisingly, drew closer to the demon, while ice slowly spread beneath her feet. She looked like the goddess of winter. Just when the demon was about to strike, an icicle burst from the ground and sent the axe flying. In the meantime, the demon's arm was bent at a strange angle. A fraction of its grayish-white bone was exposed to the air, hardly covered by any flesh. It was a gruesome scene to behold. Before the demon could even give a yelp of pain, the ice crystals proliferated rapidly from its ankles and turned it into an ice statue. Thank you. Vanner let out a sigh of relief. It's not over yet. There's going to be a second round of spearing. The witch looked up at the sky, which was currently filled with ash and smoke, and called out. Miss Molly. Vanner suddenly remembered that there was actually a time gap between each spearing attack. As the demon had just bulked up his arm, it meant that the sky was dangerous once again. Vanner wondered who Miss Molly was and was puzzled why she didn't seek shelter. Leave it to me. While Vanner was in bewilderment, a young, slightly childish voice came from the distance. Then Vanner saw an incredible scene. Above him suddenly appeared a half-transparent blue ball which gradually grew bigger in size. Soon, it covered the area within a radius of 10 meters. 2 tentacles at both ends of the ball dragged the remaining soldiers with minor injuries into a covered area while swaying from side to side. Right after all the wounded soldiers were transferred, the enemies launched their second attack. 5 or 6 bone spears pelted down at tremendous, lightning-like speed, and shot at the ball. Vanner could clearly see the spot where the head of the spear landed ripple as if the surface of the ball were a thick body of water. As the ripples split, overlapped and rushed forward, the ball started to tremble as though it would burst at any moment. However, the bone spears were stopped several meters above the ground. Good job. The blue-haired witch withdrew her ice and looked at Vanner. It's safe here for now. You can retreat with your people. No, there's something I haven't done yet. Vanner grounded his teeth, forcing himself to get up. I have to make these damn monsters suffer before I go. There was only one last step left. Vanner shambled to the Longsong cannon, limping. He picked up the matchlock and pulled toward him with all his strength. The scorching air around the muzzle soon cleared sky. The battlement, after 15 minutes of silence, was once again filled with thunderous roars. Chapter 985, The Shadow of the Dragon. As more and more mad demons and devil beasts were eradicated, they gradually recovered control over the chaotic situation. Agatha walked around the artillery battalion and found the ground littered with the broken limbs of giant monsters. She had to admit that in a close-range hand-to-hand battle, nobody could ever parallel the gods' punishment witches. Their fighting capacity was absolutely phenomenal, and it was even greater when they were equipped with the new firearms invented by His Majesty. Had the Witch Union not received their support, they would probably have struggled to fight off these 30 devil beasts and certainly would not have had time to watch out for the mad demons flanking from behind. Nevertheless, it appeared that the gods' punishment witches still preferred traditional combat methods over the large-caliber grapeshot guns to enact their vengeance. On more than one occasion, Agatha had witnessed an ancient witch give her opponent a final blow with a sword or even her fist after the latter was left sprawling on the ground under the bombardment of the firearms, as though they could only find solace in being bathed in the blood of the demons. It seemed that 400 years of waiting had changed many things. Perhaps the demons also had a difficult time understanding why they were being flattened by a group of ordinary men, who apparently possessed far greater physical strength and speed than them. Horrified by the unexpected circumstances, the last 2 mad demons, who were caught off guard by breeze, pretty much stopped resisting in the end. Meanwhile, Breeze also impaled another demon who came to rescue his peers. Presently, the substitute artillery battalion joined the battle. 4 more cannons that had previously been tipped over by the devil beasts were once again erected upright on the battlefield and were soon back to normal operation. At the same time, the first Longsong cannon that had restored its service thundered continuously, further raising the morale of the soldiers. How many enemies left? After everybody gathered around, Agatha asked Zoe. 16 if they have no further reinforcements. Zoe cast a glance at the sky. The flying devil beasts suffered a loss of about 70% of their numbers. Whatever their original intention was, they've lost. But they still refuse to leave, which signals that they must be preparing for a final attack. A final attack? Agatha knitted her brows. In order to stay away from the storm of machine gun bullets, the rest of the demons all rose somewhere higher, even beyond the range of their spears. It would definitely be trickier and more dangerous for them to approach the fortifications on the ground a second time. More importantly, the army on the ground was now fully prepared for any upcoming strike. Even if there was another round of a spearing attack, the soldiers were confident in minimizing the losses. Since a defeat was certain, the demons should have been thinking about how to retreat rather than putting up a desperate struggle. You used to be a member of the Quest Society and rarely participated personally in open combat, so you might not know much about their operational style and behaviors, Zoe explained heavily. A fully grown flying devil beast is very precious to the demons. Only a commander-level demon is entitled to so many flying devil beasts at a time. For this type of demon, completing missions is their top priority. They would rather be killed in a battle than retreat upon failure. If so, why didn't this commander come down in the first place? Breeze couldn't help asking. Because he didn't find a rival worthy of his attention. A strange smile fluttered over Zoe's face. If there was an extraordinary among us, he would have come down to challenge her long ago. Why? It's probably in their nature. Zoe rested her eyes back again on the sky. They're ferocious and barbarous creatures who enjoy slaughter. Although they've been gradually bearing an increasing physical resemblance to mankind, they're still nothing but animals. It was thanks to this violent nature that Lady Natalia and the Queen of Starfall City got so many opportunities to fight against senior magic slayers and finally elevated themselves to transcendence. In other words, the enemy was too proud to launch an attack at an opportune moment, yet had too much honor to desert his post when faced with defeat. Agatha was not sure whether Zoe's assumption was correct. However, she was certain that the latter was not any ordinary witch since she even knew details of how 2 of the 3 chiefs had been promoted. Agatha asked, "Who were you, in the Union Age? Miss Pasha didn't tell you?" Zoe smiled faintly. "I was one of Lady Natalia's personal guards, and I was also known as the Red Lotus amongst the Blessed Army." The Ice Witch instantly remembered the title. If Agatha had been the youngest senior witch, the most widely recognized genius researcher in Tequila, then Red Lotus could have been regarded as the most promising and powerful extraordinary, and was the most likely to succeed Natalia. Unfortunately, the union had fallen apart before that time could come. If Agatha remembered correctly, she and Red Lotus should have been of the same age. However, Zoe was currently not in any way similar to the person she remembered. Time had reshaped her character and turned her into a completely different person. "They're coming." Agatha was still lost in thought when Zoe reminded her. "You go protect those fragile mortals. We'll take care of these enemies." As if corroborating Zoe's statement, Sylvie's voice suddenly popped up from the sigil of listening. "Oh heavens, what's that? Agatha, watch out. There are multiple magic reactions among the enemies." Theoretically, each witch could only have one magic cyclone, whereas demons utilized embedded magic stones to apply their power. Therefore, demons could have more than one cyclone. The Union referred those demons with more than one cyclone as senior demons. They might vary a lot in terms of strength and fighting capacity, but all of them were, unequivocally, hard nuts to crack. "Any problems there?" Breeze asked apprehensively. "Oh, no need to worry," Zoe replied slowly. The Queen of Starfall City might have selected the wrong path, but there was something that she was right about. The gods' punishment witches are designed to battle senior demons. Just at that moment, a shadow suddenly leaped out of the clouds and dashed toward the artillery. Following the shadow, the other hovering mad demons all started to dive to the ground. Although the machine guns directly below them could not really aim at the descending demons due to the restrictions on the shooting angles, the anti-air emplacements placed around them did not have any such difficulties in shooting down the enemies. Several demons were shot down on their way, despite their attempts to dodge the projectiles by zigzagging through the bullet rain. This time, the opponents aimed their spears at the anti-aircraft machine guns next to the longsong cannons. Beyond a doubt, their intention was to clear the way for the shadow figure so that it could reach the core of the artillery battalion. While Agatha was assisting the soldiers in defending against the pelted bone spears, she also noticed in surprise that the object that was plummeting like a meteorite was a colossal devil beast even bigger than Maggie. Its wings and abdomen, all armored in black, gleamed like a lusterless crystal. Even its head and horns were sharper than those of normal devil beasts, making it resemble the dragons of legends at the first glance. When the dragon landed, the earth trembled. The air was saturated with ashes and dust that blinded people's eyes. Immediately after landing, the devil beast opened its huge crimson mouth, producing a long, loud belch. A burly black armored demon crept out of the devil beast's wet throat and presented himself in front of everybody. Chapter 986, Fiery Red Lotus. Although there were ominous magic reactions appearing at the rear of the encampment, Sylvie could not afford to dawdle. After giving the witches stationed there a hasty warning, she diverted her attention back to the army of demons a few miles away to the north while monitoring the battlements around her at the same time. There loomed something she had never seen before, so menacing and wicked that she didn't know whether it should be classified as a living being or an inanimate object. It was as big as a two-story building, its appearance resembling a reptile in the shape of a crab or a spider, although its torso and limbs were constituted of gleaming black stones. There was a twinge of stiffness in its movement. While its fellow demons were being blasted to smithereens under the heavy musket fire, this monster moved forward while being completely indifferent to them, almost like the machines invented by Roland. But it was not a machine in a real sense. Sylvie could spy some wriggling living tissue underneath its sturdy, thick shell, where a magic glow infiltrated the whole organism through numerous intertwined veins. She could only associate it with the word parasite. A living being nestled inside a mass of stone and metal. Suddenly, the horrid siege beast no longer seemed so fearsome when compared to this crawling monstrosity. Fortunately, the monstrosity was not invulnerable. The First Army could still cause it harm without directly hitting it. A cannon shell that landed in the vicinity of the monster would still be sufficient to damage its legs and thereby paralyze its movement. Yet there were just too many demons around the monster. Although Sylvie had been continuously giving firing instructions to the artillery, it was hard for them to accurately direct the shells. Each shell had to travel several miles before it landed at the targeted spot. By the time the devil beasts had broken through and raided the artillery battlements, only one out of the 5 crawling monsters had been stopped. While a bitter battle was going on at the rear, Sylvie was concerned about the front. The artillery battalion had probably not realized how big a threat they had become for the demons. In fact, among all the people who were participating in this war, Sylvie was the only person who witnessed the great damage caused by the longsong cannons. When a pack of demons swarmed in, that terrain 8 miles away instantly became a slaughterhouse where the hordes of demons were mercilessly butchered. Every time a shell landed, pillars of earth rose 10 meters high and broken limbs were scattered into the air. Metal shrapnel and sharp stone fragments flew in the air, penetrating the enemy's armors made of animal skins and bones. The thick body of the mad demons thus became ragdolls filled with shrapnel. Dozens of demon corpses lay sprawled on the ground in the vicinity of the crater after each bombardment, their magic blood blossoming and soaking the soil underneath. Not all the shells successfully hit the demons, but it only took the artillery 3 rounds of firing to break their formations. Although the demons were dispersed, from the stiff manner with which they ran, one could tell they were stressed out by these unprecedented, lethal weapons. Had the devil beasts not interrupted their firing, the artillery would have annihilated all the demons already. Even though the artillery team had later restored the cannons, their firing accuracy and speed were greatly compromised. The demons had taken this opportunity to advance. By the time Sylvie spotted the multiple magic reactions at the rear, the main force of the enemies was only 2 miles away from the defensive line. Now, the soldiers at the front should have been able to see swarms of demons coming up over the horizon with their naked eyes. Sylvie alerted Shabby at the front as planned. The enemies are within the shooting range of the mortars. Got it. I'll let the commander know, Shabby soon replied. By the way, how are things going at the rear? Have they not finished those flying demons yet? Something unexpected happened, Sylvie answered hesitantly. But I gather it should be all right now. If Andrea was here, we would have finished them already, wouldn't we? Well, perhaps. Sylvie decided to hold back on mentioning what she had seen so as not to let Shabby worry too much. While they were talking, Sylvie suddenly noticed that the 4 crawling monsters among the army of demon had stopped advancing. They all threw themselves to the ground. What are they planning on doing? Sylvie immediately found out the answer. She saw the back shell of the monster fly open, ejecting a cylinder that looked like a black crystal. The cylinder was as wide as a man, its surface slimy as if it had been grown out of living tissue. Like the crawling monster, the cylinder was also filled with tons of veins and blood vessels. It contracted and expanded as the magic power within moved about. The next moment, the magic cyclone inside the monster started to spin and emanate a dazzling glow. In an instant, the black crystal cylinder was thrust forward by a great force. It whistled above the demons and bolted toward the northbound slope like a magnified arrow. At the same time, the mortars of the First Army produced a tumultuous roar. Over 100 shells soared, tracing parabolic curves in the air. Pulled by gravity, the shells zoomed toward the scuttling demons. For a split second, the shells and the cylinder brushed past each other. The two powers, human and demon, had once again clashed after 400 years of peace. Shabby, shield! Sylvie cried at the top of her lungs. At these words, the bulky cylinder reached the defensive line. With a flash, the whole cylinder exploded. The crystal burst into numberless needles glinting in blue blood, and they rained down upon the soldiers waiting below. The battlement was deadly silent at that moment. Agatha and the other witches immediately drove the artillery team away from the giant monster, leaving behind only the anti-aircraft machine gun squad to battle the last few devil beasts. Soon, there were only a dozen God's punishment witches and the armored senior demon on the battlefield. The senior demon surveyed everybody coldly and suddenly let out a long wail even louder than the distant thunder of the machine guns. Everybody could perceive the extreme anger in his voice. He then reached out his right hand and threw it up in the air. Soon, a flash of light escaped from his palm. Instantly, a crackling long sword appeared in his hand. The senior demon then swung the sword at the long-song cannon. With an earth-shattering crack, the iron cannon split in half. The cut surface was a bright red color as though it had been heated to a high temperature. The ice witch held her breath, realizing that the sword was powered by magic. But Zoe remained undisturbed. So what? Are you not happy about your enemies? You came down to have a final battle against your enemies only to find that your opponents are a group of mortals, and so now you're disappointed? A thin jeer played about her lips. Zoe's tone was indifferent and even a bit derisive, but her eyes were on fire. You made the biggest mistake of your life in coming down here. If you had stayed above, you would have probably gotten to live a bit longer. Now, you'll understand how furious we have been over the past 400 years. Compared to us, your rage is frivolous. Although they could not communicate, both parties were able to discern the attitude of the other. The demon threw the sword of magic at Zoe while howling, and the sword cut through the air like a dazzling thunderbolt. Meanwhile, the two God's punishment witches beside Zoe drew close, and all three of them spread their God's punishment areas. A strange force suddenly distorted the space around the witches. The blinding flash of the sword was engulfed by a fathomless darkness and vanished into the thin air as if the thunderbolt had hit nothing. The senior demon stood there blankly gaping. While he was in a daze, the other two gods' punishment witches raised the large-caliber grapeshot guns. The battlefield was immediately saturated with the crackling sounds of gunshots. The demon shielded himself with a cloud of blue light, but the light was extinguished in a second. Even the gleaming black armor could barely protect the demon. As the shots continuously hammered the senior demon, his body twisted like a rag. By the time the firing had finished, the demon's inner organs and bones had turned into a bloody pulp. Chapter 987, A Duel. Watching its master prostrate to the ground, the giant devil beast flapped its wings, attempting to escape. It had realized that the circumstances have changed in a direction it did not foresee. There were few devil beasts left on the battlement that it could use as a diversion to help it escape. As the devil beast climbed up, its gigantic body had weighed it down, slowing its ascent. Its decision to take flight was actually incorrect because if it continued to remain on the ground, the machine gun squad would hesitate to fire, fearing they would hit their peers by mistake. However, if it rose to the air, they would not have such scruples. For a second, most of the anti-aircraft machine guns on the campground were aimed at the giant creature. Bullets lashed at the devil beast, submerging it. The sparks flickered off its armor, its flesh was exposed and torn to pieces. It plunged to the ground and gave a desperate screech. Putrid blood streamed from the numerous bullet holes and pooled under its body. Pasha let out a long sigh. Zoe was right. The gods' punishment witches were truly a great threat to senior demons. No wonder so many people in the Union had taken the side of the Queen of Starfall City. A god's punishment which could block magic power and reduce the strength of enemies who carried multiple magic stones to their level. At the same time, their power rivaled an extraordinary's. Thus, the creation of God's punishment witches could not only steady the fluctuating magic power within a witch but could also make them unrivaled when outnumbered by demons. Back then, this strategy was undoubtedly a ray of hope to the routed Union. Based on Lady Alice's initial plan, thousands of witches would have become first-class warriors if half of the non-combat witches were converted to God's punishment witches. The overall tactic of the Empire's final battle was to allow the combat witches to deal with the army of demons, the gods' punishment witches to deal with the senior demons, and the Transcendents were left with the most difficult enemies. Since the gods' punishment witches were primarily designed to exterminate demons, it was not surprising that they could kill a senior demon in such a swift manner. In other words, if God's punishment witches were so weak that it cost 10 of them to take out one senior demon, the Queen of Starfall City would have never bet on this plan. However, everything was just a little too late. Glancing at Zoe, who looked content and delighted, Agatha had mixed feelings. Had the Union implemented that plan at the very beginning, the outcome of the Second Battle of Divine Will would probably have been very different. Although the humans had been forced to retreat to the Land of Dawn, there were thousands of cities and towns still erected on the fertile plains with a total of nearly 10 million people living. The Union could have definitely built an army as powerful as the demons from this huge population. But when they lost the Battle of Divine Will, the Queen of Starfall City had barely held any lands. All she had left was less than 1 million barbarians. This plan was thus considered her last attempt to survive the war. "Did you kill it?" asked Agatha as she walked up to Zoe. The seriously injured senior demon was not completely dead yet. These grisly enemies were sometimes even more resilient than Transcendents. Even without a stone of measuring, Agatha could still observe the little remains of magic power in the demon run wild. Apparently, the latter was trying to fix its deteriorating body. Nonetheless, this did not mean that demons were immortal. They had a self-repairing limit. Even if Zoe did not give it a final blow, the demon would eventually die when it exhausted its magic power. It would also die when the red mist ran out. Perhaps Zoe preferred to give her enemy an excruciatingly painful death rather than a quick one. "I want to let him live for a bit longer." Zoe's answer surprised Agatha. "There are many demons this time. We should be able to obtain a lot of mist storage tanks from them. Treat his wounds and provide him with some red mist. He should be able to live for another few days." "What are you going to do?" asked the Ice Witch as she scowled. "Rest assured. Although I really do want him to suffer eternal torment, I'm aware that this isn't the time to take personal revenge, said Zoe solemnly. If I remember correctly, there's a witch in another unit who can link two individuals? Do you want her to link the demon? Asked Agatha in surprise. Zoe nodded. I know it's certainly risky, but if we succeed, we'll have an opportunity to confront the demons directly. Since he's a commander, it's worth taking a little bit of risk to pry into his mind. If it were in the age of the Union, the executives would have found it hard to resist such a tempting suggestion. However, the Union had fallen apart a long time ago. She believed neither Roland nor Tilly Wimbledon would agree to force a witch to venture for something so dangerous. Unless Camilla Derry volunteered herself. While Agatha was hesitating, she heard several loud bangs at the other end of the battlement. From where she stood, Agatha could see clouds of ashes spring up from the northern front. It was as if something had just swept over the field. But she did not hear any intense gunshots. Is there another group of devil beasts? Or has the demons broken through the defensive line? Agatha wondered. She immediately activated the sigil of listening and inquired about the situation. What's going on at the front line, Sylvie? A monster we've never seen is attacking us. Sylvie's voice from the other end of the line sounded pretty anxious. We require the assistance of the Longsong cannons. The moment the cylinder blasted, shells from the mortars landed among the army of demons. Since the mad demons were all wearing animal bones and leather jackets, both the mortars and the 152 caliber howitzers could seriously injure them. In fact, the mortars were more lethal as they were faster and greater in number. Flying bullets and shells streaked across the air on the battlefield, killing the demons as they sprinted without cover. The explosions created blood mist clouds, as the soldiers continuously fired. Finally, the enemies stopped their advance. Sylvie did not really pay attention to the outcome of the battle. Apart from occasionally monitoring the enemies in the air, her full attention was mainly on the four sinister crawling monsters. Unfortunately, the mortars were not much of help against these monsters made of black stones and metals. Bullets could barely penetrate their shells unless they were hit directly in the face. Suddenly, the crawling monsters ejected a black stone pillar. To her dismay, Sylvie noticed that the pillar was actually a part of these monsters. The stones and its veins gradually peeled off and combined, forming a new cylinder. Sylvie knew that they had to eliminate these enemies who were capable of launching long-distance attacks as soon as possible. Its first attack had caught everyone off guard, resulting in a significant loss among the First Army. More than 100 people at the front were injured. Furthermore, some of the soldiers in the trench were shot in their shoulders and chests. More importantly, the failure to develop any effective countermeasures to this unheard-of attack had greatly impacted the morale of the soldiers. Luckily, the monster grew much slower than soldiers loading their cannons. The artillery battalion are currently trying their best to reset the Longsong cannons. Agatha's voice calmed Sylvie down. I'll connect you to the battalion commander. Hello. Miss Sylvie. The commander sounded a bit nervous. I'm Vanner, the commander. It'll take a while for us to fully restore the operation of the Longsong cannons. Fortunately, one cannon wasn't affected. If you could tell me the shooting parameters, I can arrange people to support you right away. Sylvie clenched her fist, trying to suppress her excitement. She cast a glance at the compass in front of her and slowly pronounced her position. 10 feet 17 inches to the north, 2,310 meters away, please fire. Copy that. 10 feet 17 inches to the north, 2,310 meters away. Vanner repeated. 6th Squad, fire. Chapter 988, The First Victory on the Plain. The number 6 Longsong cannon was the one Vanner inspected prior to the attack. It was located at the far end of the battlement. Although it had received 2 rounds of spears, it was practically unscathed compared to the cannons the devil beasts tipped over. Once the soldiers were back in action, it could resume its function. A minute after Vanner received the parameters, the Longsong cannon ejected flames in the given direction. As the target was 2 kilometers away, the trajectory of the shell was quite low. Both the soldiers and demons had heard the bullets whooshing as it whistled past. The only difference was that the demons heard an ear-splitting thunder right after. The formidable Lord of War had been revived. Due to the short distance between the large-caliber cannon and the enemy, its firing accuracy had significantly improved. The first shell had landed right beside the crawling monster. It generated a shockwave which flipped the monster's colossal body over, blowing away its shell and exposing the flesh underneath. The group of mad demons which happened to be beside the crawling monster were killed along with it. From the mad demons' positions, one could tell that they were deployed at that location to prevent a raid from the witches. Unfortunately though, they were deterred by the mortars. Left with no choice, they hid beneath the giant spider, taking refuge from the flying shells behind its stone limbs. Nonetheless, this act was pointless. They had still suffered from blast waves which transmitted through the crawling monster. The shockwaves completely crushed the mad demon's inner organs and bones as it rippled through their bodies. By the time the scene became tranquil, the explosions were replaced with littered demon bodies. "We made it!" Sylvie exclaimed as she swung her fist. "The next target is 12 feet 6 inches, 2,480 meters from here." "No problem. We'll be ready in a minute." Meanwhile, the demons who endured the pain of constantly being blasted by the mortars were finally within 1 kilometer of the battlement. Just when everyone thought it was time to battle, the enemies had suddenly stopped. The whole process was less than 10 minutes. The mad demon at the very front had approached within 500 meters of the northbound slope where the first line of barbed wire stood. But he moved no further. Without the interference of the devil beasts, all the machine gun squads, including the anti-aircraft machine gun squad, aimed at the enemies who swarmed in. The whole battlefield stirred up. The First Army's equipment was currently much better than when they had fought at Coldwind Ridge. Back then, HMGs were deployed in the blockhouse with great caution due to its limited number. They were used exclusively for attacking targets that posed the biggest threat. Now, the First Army no longer had any restrictions on their access to firearms and were allowed to shoot enemies at any distance. However, such an unscrupulous usage of ammunition was very likely to be a one-time offer only. The area within 500 meters of the trench became the hunting ground of the sniper team. Usually, the demons would not have any difficulties getting through the barbed wire as they could easily jump over the fence or uproot the wooden poles. But since their opponents were a group of top-notch snipers, these actions would be very bold and stupid to do. When the demons found out that they could not close into the spearing range, they went wild. This action was not a form of military discipline or a display of soldiers' morale, it was more like the desperate struggle-cornered beasts. After thousands of demons died around the defensive line, the enemies started receding quickly. During the whole process, the First Army's machine guns had never stopped firing. The barrels had turned completely red-hot. Compared to the intense fight at the rear, the front seemed to be relatively placid. Sylvie finally felt relieved. She was perhaps the only person who understood the graveness of the situation when the duel between the two parties started. The last two crawling monsters had their magic spirals filled with magic power and were just about to strike. At the same time, the number 1 and number 3 Longsong cannons were just fixed and had thus saved everybody. Had it been 2 or 3 seconds later, the stone pillar would have caused more substantial injuries to the First Army. Nevertheless, human beings had won the battle. Mankind were once again setting foot on this long-forgotten land. They had finally defeated the demons for the first time in 400 years. Roland received the detailed report 4 days later. Due to the large number of the dead bodies, it took the First Army a considerable amount of time to clean the battlefield. Based on the instructions from the Tequila Witches, they had to first burn the demons' bodies before taking away their magic stones. Collecting magic stones was particularly important. The battle did not technically end until they had stripped the demons of the magic stones. If demons, by some means or another, retrieved these magic stones, they would soon recycle it by using it on new demons. The final result was astonishing. There were around 6,000 demons killed in action, more than the total number of the First Army who had participated in the war. Less than half of the demons were directly killed by machine guns or cannons. Most of them had died on their way as they ran out of red mist. However, this did not mean that the demons were not fully prepared for this war. During the post-war cleanup, the First Army had found dozens of siege beasts that had been transformed into transportation tools. This number had not even included those blasted to pieces. The demons could have slowly recharged the mist tanks if the human beings had been in a disadvantageous position. However, their swift defeat had completely sabotaged this plan. It was impossible for the demons to retreat to the Tequila ruins from their outpost by relying on the meager amount of red mist they carried on hand. If I remember correctly, witches can also control those siege beasts, right? Roland asked through the sigil of listening. That's right. Those beasts are essentially magic stones. With just a little bit of training, witches can also handle them. Zoe cut in. Although they're a bit slow, they can carry lots of things. The Union used to use them for long-distance transportation instead of regular mules and horses. Roland thought it would be a good idea to have them managed by the Ministry of Construction, as the construction team was currently in need of some transportation tools. For city transportation, the slow speed was actually preferred. Although there were tons of magic stones of tossing, it was a shame they were of little use. These stones were exclusive to demons because they could only exert their power when connected to a magic being. Thus, the First Army could only collect these stones together and destroy them. By the way, how did the enemies escape Sylvie's surveillance? Let me answer that for you, said Agatha as she cleared her throat. After the battle ended, we searched the entire outpost and found an underground tunnel connecting to a cave 2 kilometers away. In the cave, we discovered an underground campsite built by the demons where not only was there a mist storage tower but also a god stone of retaliation pillar. The campsite was even larger than the outpost itself. This was their real stronghold. We were indeed all deceived. Roland drew his brows together and asked, a god stone of retaliation that covers the whole campsite? Correct, Agatha said slowly. It's nearly 5 meters in diameter and 10 meters high. The surface is as smooth as a clean-cut icicle. I've never seen something like that before, not even back in the Union Age. If I didn't see it myself, I would have never believed it. Chapter 989, After the War. Roland certainly did not think that the demons had possessed such incredible power 400 years ago. Otherwise, the Witch Empire would have been eradicated from the earth within a year or two. The truth was, however, that they had ruled the world for a short decade. After all, it was impossible to compete against the demons with only a few extraordinaries. Once every outpost was protected by a similar god stone of retaliation, the witches would have no chance of survival. Roland knew how hard it was to carve out such a giant god stone of punishment pillar. The better the condition of the original stone was, the greater durability it had. They had tried to dig out the natural god stone from the bottom of the North Slope mine by shooting at it at close range but had only ended up leaving a few white marks on its surface. The only way to recover the stone was to corrode its surface with magic blood before processing it. Due to the great difficulty in obtaining them, large god stones were particularly expensive. Nevertheless, even the god stone in the main hall of the Hermes Cathedral was not that enormous. According to the Ice Witch, it seemed that the pillar had been directly cut out of a natural god stone by some sharp weapon. There were only 2 explanations for this: either the demons had acquired some astonishing carving skills or they had developed a more profound understanding of their magic power. For mankind, neither of them was good news. We can tell from the demons' new weapon that they have also been busy over the past 400 years, Roland tapped the desk. The third battle of Divine Will is probably going to be tougher than we anticipated. Roland's worst fear had come true. Compared to the demons back in the Age of the Union, the demons nowadays were not only more cunning but also more advanced in terms of their technology. For example, they had created a hybrid life form such as that crawling monster, which was seemingly used to kill regular combat witches. As the crawling monster can shoot the witches from 2 kilometers away, the witch army would have no time to use their power to fight back when they realized they were under attack. Even a scout like Sylvie would find it hard to protect her peers when the enemy started mass shooting because her ability was only effective within a radius of 5 meters. As much as I hate to admit it, the demons do evolve faster than us. Zoe broke the silence. If this happened in the Union Age, we would have probably been squashed already. Roland could easily imagine how slim the witches' chances of survival would be in this situation. They would be double-teamed and outnumbered by the mad demons on the ground, threatened by the senior demons lurking in midair, and also attacked by the destructive new monsters. The witches would be doomed to fail. The current problem was whether the 5 crawling monsters were the only ones in possession of the demons or just a very small part of their advance force. Had demons developed any war weapons other than those crawling monsters? If they had, what would they look like and how were they going to deal with them? Roland needed all of this information right away. Next came the casualties of the First Army. Roland already had a rough estimate of the number after the war. There were indeed few discrepancies between his number and the actual statistics obtained 4 days later. Without a doubt, the low casualty rate was largely attributed to Nana and Lily. There were 190 people injured and 75 killed in action, and most of the casualties were directly caused by the crawling monsters. It was impossible for the soldiers down in the trench to dodge the stone needles raining down from the sky. Once the needles had penetrated human bodies, they had, pretty much, nailed the people to the trench. In order to transfer the wounded to the shelter, the field medic must have had to pull the 1-meter-long needles out first. This operation had, consequently, resulted in a large amount of blood loss. Due to the mishandling, many soldiers had died within a few minutes. Roland would certainly not blame the rescue team. In fact, it was the first time for the field medic to provide assistance to the war effort, and they had actually bought a lot of time for the wounded soldiers. As Nana was not able to treat so many people at a time, she had had to treat those who had suffered fatal injuries first, leaving those who had sustained minor injuries to the rescue team. Roland could envision that as the war became increasingly intense, what Nana could do in the future would be increasingly limited. At the end of the day, the First Army would have to solve the medical problem themselves. "Please bring the ashes of the soldiers killed in action back," Roland said in a low voice. "Greycastle won't forget them." "Yes, Your Majesty," Iron Axe replied solemnly. "So, do you have any plans for the First Army in the near future?" the Pearl of the Northern Region asked. The enemies definitely did not anticipate such a great loss. According to Miss Lightning, the patrolling devil beasts near the Tequila ruins have reduced significantly. She only found demons more than 100 kilometers away from the ruins. Further, Miss Sylvie has also confirmed that except for the towering iron monsters, there are less than 1,000 specks of magic glow. In other words, the demons now have very few footholds on the fertile plains. After a long pause, Roland made his decision. "Head back to Neverwinter when all of the wounded recover." "Are you concerned about the supplies?" "If we can't seize the ruins, there's no point advancing to the north." Roland sipped the tea. "Plus, winter is coming." Although the months of demons did not necessarily arrive during winter time, for people living around the barbarian land, winter meant endless snow and an overcast sky. During the months of demons, the First Army not only had to deal with the harsh weather but also watch out for the demonic beasts that lurked everywhere. There was neither any guarantee that both food and winter supplies would be sufficient in Neverwinter, nor was there ample ammunition for the army to wage a multifaceted war. Hence, the winter in the barbarian land was always perilous. By the time the ground was covered by thick snow, it would not be that easy to retreat. "I see," Edith said. "The General Staff will collaborate with Mr. Commander-in-Chief and work out a retreating plan." "Safety is our top priority," said Roland. After he finished the conference call, Agatha suddenly cut in. "Your Majesty, there's another thing that you need to know." "Really? What is it?" "Well, the thing is that the senior demon defeated by the gods' punishment witches is still alive." After hearing the full account, Roland was astonished. "Is it fine to connect the demon with Camilla?" The channeling would enable the channeling witch and the demon to share their minds and be fused into one. In other words, the witch would be able to learn what it felt like to be a demon once the two were connected. It was definitely not going to be a pleasant feeling. The soul transfer of the tequila witches had shown that any transfer would create confusion and that the process was irreversible. As such, it was certain that the clash of the two entirely different living beings would be a disaster. This reminded Roland of the word spiritual contamination. It's dangerous, so Zoe and I had a thorough discussion and came up with a relatively feasible way to do this. Chapter 990, Behind the Soul. What way? After a short pause, Agatha went on, since it's very dangerous to channel a demon, we're thinking of transforming the demon into a man. Are you suggesting a soul transfer? Roland asked as he realized the hint. You once said that there are demons in the dream world. This shows that the successor of Starfall City has extracted a soul out of a demon before. At least, this tells us that demons would be affected by a soul device as well. Zoe explained. We simply need to transfer the soul of the senior demon to a god's punishment warrior. This way, it would bear all the risks that occur during the transfer, such as sensory loss and disorientation. I see. Roland nodded. In other words, the demon would be perplexed by the spinning sensations while being forced to adapt to the foreign human body. During this time, the channeling witch could easily read its mind. Furthermore, the witch would be more familiar with the sensations of a human's body than a demon's one. The method sounded very promising, but Roland was concerned about another problem. He asked, has it occurred to you that you would lose a vacant god's punishment warrior if you carry out this plan? After the church fell apart, they could no longer receive new god's punishment warriors. Compared to a senseless life, we prefer to stay in your dream. So, that's fine with us, said Zoe. Ahem, Roland almost choked on the tea. Although he knew Zoe was a woman, he felt goosebumps crawl up his bare skins when the actual words came from a man's body. Just joking. Zoe summoned up a rare smile. In fact, there are quite a few defective bodies in our warehouse that we can use for this project. Plus, compared to the potential gain from this experiment, losing a god's punishment warrior is really nothing. We would like to make the small sacrifice. Defective bodies? Asked Roland after clearing his throat. It isn't actually easy to travel from Hermes to our hiding place, especially during the months of demons, because you have to climb over the impassable mountain range. Some gods' punishment warriors had indeed crawled there because their feet were eaten by demonic beasts. We surely can't use them to fight. Initially, we planned to offer them to nobles so that they could enjoy a life of immortality. Roland twitched his lips, doubting if such a life would be truly an enjoyment. But even if they're defective, they should contain some power similar to a god's stone of retaliation. If the body releases its power during the experiment, wouldn't it cause problems? That, you don't need to worry about. It took us decades to learn how to fully control a new body, Zoe replied, and it took us even longer to successfully activate our god's punishment realm. A lot of people couldn't get the hang of it until they completed their second transfer. Even if the demon has some unusual talent in adapting to a new vessel, it isn't likely that it could do that during the interrogation. Agatha added, the worst scenario is the channeling being interrupted, but we've confirmed from Sylvie that the pain caused by such an interruption is just temporary. By the way, have you told Ms. Camilla about your plan? Asked Roland as he suddenly thought of a crucial problem. We have. She refused to do that at first, for this is something she's never done before. No matter who the interrogator is, she has to take some risks, but Zoe persuaded her. Really? Roland was suspicious. Zoe was definitely not an eloquent person. It was actually very simple, Your Majesty, Zoe explained. I just told her that I'd be the person who would channel the demon. Roland was a little surprised. I'm an extraordinary and also the first awakened god's punishment witch. So, I'm the best person to channel the demon, she said nonchalantly. After all, I proposed conducting this experiment, so I should be the person who bears all the risks. Roland realized that this was probably the reason why he did not hate the ancient witches despite their astounding arrogance and haughtiness. They had greater courage than many people and were always the first ones to stand up to their enemies. I see, then do what you said. Roland gave his approval after a moment of silence. Make sure that you keep an eye on the senior demon on the way back. "Ah, I'll take very good care of it, Your Majesty," said Zoe with a smile. Perhaps Zoe was more interested in escorting the demon than interrogating it. After the call, Roland sank into his thoughts. Do men and demons really have souls? If they don't, how did the tequila witches switch bodies freely? What is the mechanism of the soul device? If they do, why can their souls be extracted and assigned arbitrarily to any vessels, but can't be completely independent of their bodies? Why aren't souls immortal? Also the dream world. Why does such a world, which is essentially a virtual space, look so real? How did it come into existence? According to the ancient book Down in the Ruins, the so-called light beams would lead to the divine domain. So, what would this divine domain look like? Roland believed that he would not know the answers to these questions until he figured out the nature of both magic power and the battle of divine will. Regardless, he now had a chance to witness a soul transfer. Time seemed to travel a lot faster compared to when they had left for the war. Since City Hall was rapidly expanding and had gradually developed a mature and experienced workforce, there were fewer things that required Roland's attention. Therefore, he allotted most of his free time to several major industrial projects. The pilot project for the glider was still in progress. The aircraft operation manual drafted by Tilly, which initially contained only a few pages, soon turned into a big book as thick as intermediate chemistry. When Roland added the cover to it, he had chosen gold as the font color. Thunder had slowly gotten the hang of the steel ship. Although he had experienced quite a few mechanical breakdowns at the beginning, after several upgrades, the ship was finally ready to sail. Furthermore, the construction of the spellcaster tower built specifically for Agatha had been completed in the last month of fall. This 5-story concrete building had instantly become the new landmark of Neverwinter due to its peculiar architectural style and its extraordinary height. It was even taller than the Lord's castle. Beyond a doubt, it would be the most conspicuous building in the city until the completion of the Miracle Building. Apart from those mentioned above, the construction of the oil fractionator and the new power engine assembling plant was also close to completion. Normally in the past, the whole western region would become quieter as winter drew closer, as if all the cities and towns had entered dormancy. However, ever since the establishment of Neverwinter, this was no longer the case. The city was particularly busy this year. There were crowds and newly erected houses everywhere, from the North Slope mining area all the way to the harbor at Shallow Beach. The hustle and bustle of the city impressed all the merchants who visited here. A month and a half later, the First Army finally returned after a prolonged absence. The residents in Neverwinter all greeted them at the meadow in the suburb. The cheers of the crowd were deafening. On that very day, flurries of snows drifted down from the sky. A long winter was coming. Chapter 991, Burdened by Destiny. After Zoe bid farewell to His Majesty, she led the gods' punishment witches who were part of the expedition back to the third border city. After she took care of the arrogant senior demon, she was guided by Aletheia to a secret chamber in the deep underground, where Pasha and Celine were waiting as well. Other than the captured demon, they were apparently more concerned about other matters. What do you think? Shutting down the heavy stone gates, Aletheia anxiously dropped in front of her. Can we win? Didn't we already win? Zoe said matter-of-factly. Aletheia pointed at Zoe's forehead with her tentacles. Don't tease me anymore. You know exactly what I'm talking about. As she was the only extraordinary of Tequila, she undoubtedly had a closer relationship with the senior witches than anyone else. After the collapse of the Union, the ancient witches who survived began to follow the principle of every witch is equally important, but the old class system still had some influence. Since she's so relaxed, I think it should be a good answer. Pasha smiled lightly. In fact, I'm not sure, said Pasha. Zoe also began to act more seriously after hearing Pasha's remark. Nowadays, the demons are probably considerably different from the enemies we faced 400 years ago, not only in the use of magic but also in the varieties of species. She then elaborated on the entire battle process. Arguably, Lady Alice's idea was correct, but according to her plan, mankind would inevitably fail. Evidence has shown that the god's punishment, which was indeed a viable weapon for restraining the senior demon. Unfortunately, this weapon alone meant it would still be difficult to contend with the enemy on the battlefield. Powerful armor did not indicate they would be spared injury. After being placed in front of the new war machines, the god's punishment witch's advantage would be formidable and impenetrable. Once they were at war, the plan of the Queen of Starfall City would lose its meaning. After confirming this, Pasha seemed more relieved and looked as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her. So that means we didn't follow the wrong leader. Lady Natalia's decision was correct. This is really great news. Yeah, this is really great news, Celine whispered. Her voice was faint and choking with emotion. This was an incredible thing for someone who had lived for more than 400 years. But at this moment, Zoe empathized with the rest of them. While the majority of the Union's leaders supported Alice, they stood by the Queen of Sunchasur due to their different ideologies. They were utterly torn apart by an unjust assault on the witch's empire that entirely destroyed the foundation of the Union. Zoe would remember this scene till her dying day, when a severely hurt Blessed Army comrade lay dying in her arms and said, "You were the ones who ruined it all." Since then, they have felt this huge burden in their hearts. Death was nothing to be afraid of after all. What was frightening was to be misunderstood and abandoned by their companions, while searching for a glimmer of hope in the dark. If they failed in their mission, that would mean that they have destroyed the only way the witches would continue to survive. That kind of sin was unforgivable and could not be offset even by death. It was with this firm determination that everyone endured the unconscious shells and have persisted until now. Now that Alice's plan has been proven to be wrong, they naturally felt a long-lost liberation. Even if the final outcome were still the total destruction of humankind, the fate of the survivors would not be as critical. Even so, Lady Natalia was just on par with the Queen of Starfall City, said Alethea, rubbing her nose that had long since ceased to exist. We have not yet won the final victory. It's too early to celebrate. Don't worry. Now that you've become like this, even if you cry, no one can see it. Pasha. Zoe shook her head and smiled. I haven't finished speaking yet. Although I can't say for sure who will win the battle of divine will, at least I've seen some hope. After hearing these words, the 3 senior witches became quiet. In the 400 years of searching in the dark, hope was the most desired thing. No one knew whether the chosen one really existed, but they had to continue searching. This kind of aimless confusion was always on their mind. The longer time passed, the more intense the suffering felt. In the beginning, people often discussed the abilities of God's chosen person and her apparent age and appearance. However, when black money was used to begin the search for the chosen one, nobody dared to talk about it. They feared creating a false image of the chosen one, as they would not be able to handle the disappointment when they'd find someone fitting their standards and having them turn out not to be the one. Because of this, hope had become something of a luxury. However, now they could say this word easily. The ancient witch who realized this couldn't help but fall into a moment of silence. After a while, Pasha broke the silence. So, can we complete the task that Lady Natalia entrusted to us? Entrusted? Alethea was shocked. Wait, we haven't even found the chosen one yet. I don't have an opinion, Zoe said with a shrug. In the ancient books of the underground civilization, there was no rule stating that the key holders had to be male or female, right? After all, whether or not they had any concept of gender was still unknown. Natalia had left behind a will that said, if they could find the chosen one, then everyone should treat her as the chief, destroy the demons, and rebuild Tequila. Although the 5-colored stone reflected a chosen one that was different from what they had imagined and could not activate the instrument of divine retribution, it was consistent in dealing with the demon. I also feel that there's nothing wrong with it. Celine was the last to speak. The ancient books also did not specify that there should be only one candidate for the chosen one. After we have discovered the newly selected witch, we can still change the candidate. Since you've all agreed, well then. Alethea sighed helplessly. Whether there will be a new candidate or not, we can forget about that for now. But I think it's unnecessary to change the candidate, said Zoe, looking at Pasha. What you were once worried about has already started to happen. Did the witches exclude you in battle? It wasn't that obvious. She told the story of Camilla again. After hearing that I would be the interrogator, she agreed to the request of connecting the demon's heart. This also shows that although she was concerned about the safety of the witches, that did not include immortal monsters like me. The atmosphere became a little intense. As early as 100 years ago, Pasha mentioned this possibility. Although they considered themselves to be witches, the new generation of witches did not necessarily think so. Regarding appearance, characteristics, or ability, there was no similarity between the two. They resembled neither witches nor humans. Roland Wimbledon, who was able to accept them so quickly, was more like an alien. As the history of the Union gradually faded, the new awakened ones might no longer see them as witches. And in an extreme scenario, to explore the mysteries of magic power and the techniques of the underground civilization, the witches might even use them as guinea pigs. Although this idea was somewhat pessimistic, after centuries or even thousands of years, that could really happen. When she heard Zoe's self-mockery, Pasha sighed. I see, but I don't regret it. Nobody answered, it was their choice as well. If we can accomplish the wishes of the three chiefs, our mission will come to an end, she paused and said, what happens in the future is not something we can control. But at least for now we can plan a way out for ourselves. Should we hide in the mountains, disappear, or find a place to bury ourselves? Alethea was displeased. Of course not, said Pasha, shaking her mane tentacles, we can be an indispensable force in the human kingdom. Chapter 992, Future Direction. You mean as God's punishment witches? The king who's a common person might not think so. Power is not determined just by force, Pasha pointed toward Zoe and said, real strength lies in what influences the human kingdoms of today to change. This cannot be replaced and it's exactly where our strength lies. I see what you mean. Celine exclaimed. Compared to compatibility, this really is more important, she added as she came to the sudden realization. Ha, said Zoe. You can leave me out of it. This task would suit Faldy and the rest. Hey, what the H*LL are you talking about? Exclaimed Ellen in dissatisfaction. Why couldn't I understand it all? Pasha was talking about knowledge, said the youngest extraordinary. Aren't there colleges, libraries, and private scholars in His Majesty's dream world already? Since everything in the dream world comes from his memory, everyone should be able to learn. Compared to selective transcripts, it would obviously be better to fully absorb all that knowledge. As long as we allocate some time away from our leisure time, we could start learning the most basic information. It wouldn't take more than dozens of years and His Majesty would be able to have an additional group of helpers that can understand what he wants. The energy of common people will fade as their body ages, but we don't have to worry about this. A century's time would be enough to make a god's punishment which His Majesty's heir. This is our greatest advantage. Pasha added, especially after he passes away. Only we know what the world will look like. If His Majesty Roland wants to continue his plans, then it can only succeed through us. Even if we weren't witches, we wouldn't be affected too much. In a certain way, it would be disadvantageous to us if there were any attempt to overthrow the will of His Majesty, but the Witch Union would certainly respond to that. On the other hand, if we're only in charge of knowledge, this would be good for any faction. Even if we don't possess combat strength, we'll still have force even if it's very lightweight. Isn't this the Cloud School? Elle grumbled. According to legends, when most human beings were still ignorant, some sages came together to fan the flames of civilization. They taught people how to make ironwork, weave clothes, and tillage livestock until human beings populated the entire land of Dawn. Hundreds of years later, they reached the summit of their power. All those in power sought to win them over by any means, and many members then turned from becoming knowledgeable communicators to being the private collection of those in power. The leader of the sages discovered this point and moved the organization out to major city-states. He also stipulated that they should not be easily involved in politics, urging them to only focus on the mysteries of the world and uncovering the secrets of the ancient ruins. Since they were relocated to the top of a mountain covered by clouds all year round, everyone called it the Cloud School. Although these people rarely interacted with the common people, their status was still elevated. No matter how the kings in power kept changing, they were still respectful to the Cloud School. Every year, they would send a large number of supplies and young students, just to get guidance from these sages. But this period did not last long, as the demons soon infiltrated mankind. The first battle of divine will broke out. It was at this time that a disturbing rumor gradually spread. It stated that these brutal and terrifying beasts were introduced into the land of Dawn by a sage hundreds of years ago. The reputation of the Cloud School plummeted, and it was taken over by the demons as no leader willing to lend a helping hand. Finally, it became a dusty memory of history books. "At least we won't collude with the demon," said Celine defensively. "And the title of Manager of Knowledge is not so bad. It's better than the titles that were set by the Quest Society. Anyway, this is only a preliminary direction. Any plans for the future can only be decided after the victory against the demons," Pasha said as she smiled and patted Celine's head with her tentacle. "Well, let's adjust the soul instrument. After the completion of the celebrations outside, we should also have finished our preparations here. I don't think His Majesty has the patience to wait until tomorrow." When the residents of the city were still celebrating the victory, Roland had already entered Third Border City while leading the United Front Army. He was certainly impatient. If the demon city in the memory fragment was from hundreds of years ago, then the information stored in this senior demon's brain would be the latest intelligence about the enemy. Given the ineffectiveness of conventional intelligence channels for aliens, the significance of this opportunity was particularly important. As soon as he stepped into the core area of the hall, he noticed something strange. He saw that the tequila witches lined up in a neat queue in the center of the hall with their leader, the threefold original carrier senior witch. The god's punishment, which placed her elbows at a level position and overlapped her fingers onto her chest, before bowing to him. It wasn't the first time that he had seen this strange manner of saluting, as it was usually the special courtesy of the lower-level witches to their superiors. However, before he even had the chance to ask questions, the three carriers also overlapped their tentacles in front of their bodies and fell to the ground. The voice of Pasha also rang in his head. "Thank you, Your Majesty. Tequila will always be loyal to you." This made Roland somewhat surprised. The previous time she thanked him was probably due to the fact that there was a chance to defeat the demons and get revenge, but the meaning of the latter sentence was obviously different. Although the United Front required all the coalition leaders to work for the leader, the other party's respectful behavior told him that these two were not the same thing. He suddenly remembered that senior witches themselves were the upper class of the Union, and that they would only need to salute the three transcendents in that manner. Did this mean they considered him as one of the three chiefs in the Union? Although he was not clear why their attitude had changed so much, after being in power for so long, he was still sensitive enough to know that now was not the right time to investigate. Roland coughed twice and treated it like a normal greeting. "It's not necessary to thank me. This victory belongs to all the people present. By the way, how's the preparation for the soul transfer?" "We can start at any time." Pasha pointed to a purple magic core behind her. "Please come with me." As he followed her down to the core, Roland noticed that there were two stone beds set up next to her. On the left bed, there was a male God's Punishment Army soldier with no feet. His hair was gray, and it was obvious that he had been transformed for a long time. The right bed had a figure that could not be described as human at all. Not only were the limbs missing, but even the black armor on its body was full of depressions. It was difficult to imagine it still being alive under such circumstances. "Generally speaking, it would not be able to survive until now," explained Zoe, as if she had seen his doubts. "If Miss Nana's treatment was not available, it should have died the same day. In addition, Lady Agatha also helped a great deal, otherwise, we'd not have been able to conserve the red mist for so long." However, in order to prevent the senior demon from recovering on the road, a series of adjustments were needed. The result is what you can see right now. "Adjustment?" Wendy said confusedly. "How?" "It's very simple. As soon as it starts to come around, I would give it a stab. Thus, most of its magic would be consumed for self-healing. This was the first time that I had done such a job, so I'd almost caused it to stop breathing, said Zoe whilst stupefied. In fact, it seemed that she was looking forward to this the most. Sensing that the atmosphere was a little tense, Roland cleared his throat and said, "In that case, let's not waste time. We should start the transfer now." "As you wish." Celine reached out with her main tentacle and inserted it into the core. Chapter 993, Soul Interrogation, Part 1. The magic core, which was shaped like a giant spindle, suddenly expanded while giving out a purple light. Its luminescence lit up the entire hall. It floated 2 meters above the ground and began to spin, looking like a fabulous merry-go-round. Seeing this, Roland had to admit that the magic power, to a certain extent, could not be explained by physical concepts. After the skeleton structure automatically expanded, all its parts could somehow stay in the air without falling to the ground under the influence of gravity. It looked as if there was an invisible hand holding them together. How did the underground civilization create these things? He looked at Pasha. "Can you make copies of them if I give you the same materials?" "I'm afraid we cannot do so for now, Your Majesty." Pasha shook her head. "Although I'm reluctant to admit it, the underground civilization did have a deeper understanding of the magic power than the Union. Celine is already one of the best researchers of the Quest Society, but even she only learned to operate them in the past hundreds of years. We are short-handed. It's a major problem." Celine turned around. "We can't activate the magic core simply by injecting our magic power into it. We have to connect ourselves to the thousands of sensors in it. Common people can never do this. In other words, if I want to learn to use this magic core, I have to transfer my soul into an original carrier in the same way as you did?" Tilly asked. "That's right. A summer insect never knows how cold the winter is. A deaf man never hears anything in the world." Celine sighed with profound resignation. "A human being can hardly imagine what I feel when I'm operating the magic core. I can't find an appropriate word in the human language to describe this particular feeling to you either. Given that, now only Pasha and I can control a magic core." "Wait. Do you mean that the main tentacle on you, which looks rough, is actually very sensitive?" Roland was surprised. "Yes. Not only the main tentacles but also the other tentacles on us are highly sensitive," Celine confirmed. "They are able to smell and to feel cold and hot, wet and dry. They can sense even the slightest touch, and the main tentacles can even capture the flow of the magic power. So once you transfer your soul into a carrier, you won't be able to adapt to a human body anymore. Are you interested in it?" "No, I was merely curious." Roland turned his head away to stop the conversation. He had to clear his mind at such a crucial moment. He remembered that an original carrier's main tentacle was also her weapon, and according to Phyllis, the carriers were as powerful as God's punishment witches regarding physical strength. Based on what Celine had said just now, he realized that an ordinary man who was unable to sense the magic power could never study it in depth. Without a reliable observation and measurement method, this study could only be conducted by a few original carriers for now. Number 3 core has been activated in the soul instrument mode. The soul transfer is about to begin. Celine's voice interrupted his thoughts. Hearing this, Pasha and Alethea also inserted their main tentacles into the giant spindle apparatus. Roland widened his eyes in fear of missing a single detail of the process. However, this transfer process did not look as extraordinary as he imagined. 2 beams of light shone out of the core and covered the 2 stone beds below. The magic power inside the skeleton structure began to surge. After 15 minutes, Celine sighed of relief. "Well, we are lucky. The instrument has caught the demon's soul. Now, all we need to do is wait for it to enter the God's punishment warrior's body." "That's it?" Roland blinked. "Yes, in fact, the soul transfer is a process of exchanging keys," Pasha explained. "If you had observed the process through a 5-colored stone, you would have been able to see the demon's beam of light move to the God's punishment warrior. Before the ancient witch finished her sentence, the god's punishment warrior who had lied on the bed motionlessly suddenly opened his eyes. His face was contorted and thus looked exceptionally ferocious. He could not stop shaking and his fingers, which looked like dead wood, twisted violently. Some weird sounds came out of his throat. Seeing this, all the witches around subconsciously took a step back. Don't worry. That's the normal reaction shortly after the soul enters into an unfamiliar body, Zoe said. We didn't look any better when we transferred our souls into the god's punishment warriors for the first time. We can hardly eat or drink without someone else's help. Roland pictured the scene. A group of exiled ancient witches kept fumbling around in a cold underground cave for a dozen years. He was deeply impressed by the willpower of the tequila survivors. Now that the demon is panicking and in a confused state, it's time for us to get started, Lady Camilla. Zoe glanced at everyone and continued. No matter what you want to know, you can ask me directly. I'll repeat what I've heard from the demon. She paused. And I have a request. Go ahead. Roland nodded. As long as I don't gesture a stop, please don't halt the mind resonance no matter what happens. Zoe stressed each word with due strength. The interrogation is the most important thing. This, Camilla Derry looked hesitant, which was a rare thing. I promise. Without any hesitation, Roland approved Zoe's request. Seeing her determination, he believed he did not need to worry too much, and he really wanted to respect her wish. If so, I'll start to use my ability now. Chief Butler of Sleeping Island looked at Roland profoundly and then put one hand on the shoulder of Zoe and the other on the shoulder of the god's punishment warrior. The next moment, Zoe looked miserable. It seemed that she could not stop herself from growling out. However, Roland immediately knew that this roar must have come from the demon and it might somehow be able to roar through the witch's mouth in the mind resonance. What have you done to me? Zoe's voice sounded totally different now. Stupid crawlers, low-grade species, let me go. Otherwise, I'll make this woman suffer. The witches could not help gasping. Is Zoe? Don't worry. The demon is just bluffing, said Anna, calmly. Look at her finger. At this moment, the others noticed that the god's punishment which raised one finger and shook it with ease. Apparently, she was not controlled by the demon. Roland quickly understood why she acted this way. In comparison to a question-and-answer method, letting the demon speak through her own mouth was a better approach since it would give the demon less time to think and prepare. You were defeated by us. Roland sneered. If we are stupid crawlers, what about you? I was defeated? Zoe's voice sounded much deeper all of a sudden. She seemed to be stunned and caught in agony. Roland could not tell whether the painful expression came from Zoe herself or the confused demon. He did not want to give the enemy any chance to take a breath, so he continued to put pressure on the demon. Yes, you got riddled with bullets, and your army was annihilated. Half of your soldiers were killed on the battlefield, and the other half failed to flee back to Tequila in the end. We burnt down thousands of them and destroyed your underground camp, so tell me who's the low-grade species? Roland shouted out the last question to the demon. No, this is impossible, unless, Zoe shook her head violently. After a moment, she looked up and muttered in astonishment, did you get a legacy shard and upgrade your species? Did you create those weapons, based on the contents of the shard? Roland captured the keywords instantly. What's a legacy shard? What do you mean by upgrade? Chapter 994, Soul Interrogation, Part 2. For a moment, Roland wanted to joke with the demon by saying, you are also a member of Tataran? Forgive me. I didn't recognize you. However, he gave up on this idea eventually. After all, he came here to interrogate the demon. He did not want to undermine his own authority. In the state of mind resonance, the demon could manage to understand and speak the human language, but when it came across a word without counterpart in its own language, it would paraphrase the word. Given that, it might misunderstand or misuse the most common words in the human language. Instead of answering Roland's questions, the demon rambled in agony. No, it doesn't make sense. You've never entered into the Sky-Sea realm, and you'll never be able to do so. How can you get a legacy shard? But if you don't have one, how come you can defeat me? You are lying. Caberdabi will never believe you. As the demon's soul had been transferred into the god's punishment warrior, it could hardly control its own emotions during this moment. Before the interrogation, Roland had decided to grab this opportunity to delude the demon into leaking information which it would never mention under normal circumstances. He continued to push the demon. Do you need more hints? You failed to lure my army into your trap and had to confront us on the battlefield, but before your army got close to us, they suffered heavy casualties. You led your troops to join the fight, wanting to revert this situation. As soon as you landed, however, you got shot down by the god's punishment witches. The fight between you and the witches lasted about 10 seconds, and she's the one who led the witches to defeat you. Try to read her memory and then you'll see how vulnerable you appeared on the battleground. Suddenly, the senior demon looked depressed. Zoe interrupted the demon by showing it what had happened during the battle. It took her just a moment since the mind resonance significantly accelerated the pace of information exchange. You can't change the result of the battle by denying it, and your thought sounds ridiculous to me. Roland sneered. We've never been to the Sky-Sea realm, so we can't own a legacy shard? I suggest we unify the concept first. If you don't tell me what a legacy shard is, how can I answer your question? Maybe in our eyes, it isn't a valuable thing at all. Stupid bug, you must be joking. Caberdabi sounded very angry. It's the cause of the battle of divine will and determines the fate of the species. You think it's not precious? Pasha suddenly thought of something. Wait, does the shard look like a red crystal? Is it shaped like a spindle and able to bring anyone close to it into a spacious hall where he or she will see something incredible? The relics of gods. Tilly exclaimed in a deep voice. You call them the relics of gods? Sure enough, you are just low-grade crawlers, the demon responded scornfully. They've nothing to do with deities. Each species has a shard like that. They can upgrade themselves by swallowing it, and once they lose it, they will become food for the other species. Now, do you realize how stupid you are? When those underground cowards died out, you still hid in a corner on the ground. How could you get their legacy? Hearing this, Roland's heart suddenly jumped. That's why it was so sure that human beings couldn't get a shard or a relic. The 4 picture scrolls represent 4 different civilizations. A civilization had to defeat another to obtain its legacy. During the first battle of divine will, when the underground civilization was extinct, we were busy fighting against demons. It's impossible for us to rob the underground civilization of its relic. He looked around and found that everyone had a grave look on their face. Apparently, everybody realized that they had just heard important information. First of all, what the demon said confirmed what the tequila witches had thought about the relics. Roland still remembered that Wendy had exclaimed, "How come we've fought for hundreds of years just because of a useless stone? The divine will is so cruel." Now he found that a relic not only determined the survival of civilization but also had high practical value for another civilization. That meant no party in this battle would be willing to conciliate. Secondly, according to Caberdabi, demons had already upgraded themselves. Though it did not mention the specific process of swallowing a relic, it apparently attributed all the progress that a species made and the invention of new weapons to the relic. Roland could not help wondering. Maybe they can inherit the knowledge accumulated by another species by swallowing a relic. Given that, did they create the giant skeleton monsters and the strange demons based on the technology of the underground civilization? This is incredible. Even the Industrial Revolution can't achieve this kind of effect. Such a revolution needs lots of raw materials and professional workers, and it only happens when there's an enormous technological breakthrough. In comparison, inheriting knowledge by swallowing a relic sounds like force transfer in kung fu fiction. A species will be extinct and lose everything to its opponent after losing its relic? If it's true, it's indeed a fearful secret. No, it can't be counted as a secret. It's important news for human beings, but it won't affect the result of the battle of divine will. For any party in this war, knowing the importance of the relics won't guarantee the ultimate victory. Human beings have never had a proper idea about the relics until now. That's why we can't rally for the fight for the past thousands of years and lost again and again in the battles. Human beings can't compete with the other species depicted in the painting scrolls. We've wasted too much time on infighting. Roland's mouth went dry. He licked his lips and picked out the most crucial question among all the thoughts went through his mind. As you also refer to this war as Battle of Divine Will, do you believe that it's arranged by deities? That's how you think of divine will? The senior demon sounded much calmer this time, which was probably because it had remained quiet for a long time and had a chance to prepare during this period of time. Well, it seems not bad to let you know the truth before you die out. Listen carefully, Bugs. The battle has nothing to do with the deities. It's just among the civilizations. The final winner will be able to upgrade and open the door to the fountain of magic. When that happens, the winner will gain omnipotent power and his will become the divine will. But, forget about it, stupid crawlers. You'll never get such a chance. You are doomed to perish. How do you know that? What? Do you think that I, Cabradhab, will continue to talk to you? The senior demon sneered. What do you mean? Suddenly, Roland noticed something wrong and called out, Zoe? I'm afraid that this female can't hear your voice for the moment. You used a soul-transferring trick to confuse my mind and then used mind-reading ability to read my thoughts. Bugs, you really haven't made any progress for the past hundreds of years. Zoe now sounded cold and heartless. You dare to play magic tricks on me. You are headed for trouble. I'm Cabradabi. Though I can't control this body, for now, that doesn't mean I can't use my magic power. Camilla. Roland shouted to Chief Butler of Sleeping Island. It's too late. Say goodbye to this female. With shrill laughter, Zoe closed her mouth. Camilla Derry went pale as if she could not believe what had happened. The soul in the God's Punishment Warrior disappeared. Chapter 995, Soul Interrogation, Part 3. What? Everybody gasped in horror and simultaneously looked at Zoe. What Cabradabi said did not sound like boasting. Since the God's punishment which was connected to the demon by Camilla, the demon's soul that had disappeared must have sneaked into Zoe's body. Alethea was the first one to take action. Whilst Camilla was crying out in alarm, she swung her main tentacle, which was strong enough to crush a devil beast, at Zoe. She spared no effort to press Zoe down to the ground, and even the slate floor where the God's punishment which landed got cracked. Zoe spewed out a mouthful of blood and passed out. The hall fell into silence. Everyone in the hall understood that Alethea launched a sudden attack to prevent the God's punishment which from causing damage, since the demon might be able to control Zoe through the mind connection. Once it managed to make the God's punishment which spread an anti-magic area, no matter how small it would cause significant harm. This was particularly true for most of the witches, who were not prepared to treat Zoe as an enemy. In comparison to those witches, Alethea, a former commander of the Blessed Army, was much more experienced in fighting. She acted right after the demon blustered out its threat and did not give it any chance to react. Zoe was knocked down by Alethea's main tentacle and appeared like a dummy during the whole process. She did not fight back or struggle as the other witches had expected. It seemed that the demon failed to control the God's punishment which successfully. Did the demon's soul really sneak into Zoe's body? After a while, Roland broke the silence. I've never encountered such a situation. Camilla still looked frightened. Mind resonance is just a communication method. How come Cabradabi could get out of its own body and enter into Zoe's body through the mind connection? Are you sure? Tilly frowned and asked. We can't be sure until Zoe takes the initiative to speak to us. Alethea loosened her grip on the God's punishment which but still pinned her to the ground. Souls can't survive without carriers, otherwise, we wouldn't have had to rely on these things left by the underground civilization. Although wiping out its soul in the process is a possibility, It's also possible that it was able to successfully transfer its soul into Zoe's body. We have to prepare for the worst. I think I've a way to figure it out. Roland thought for a moment. If I bring Zoe's light beam into my dream world. I can't agree to that. Wendy immediately interrupted. Your Majesty, you should avoid taking risks as much as possible. Your Majesty's safety is of utmost importance. Yes, I agree with Wendy. What if the demon manages to occupy your body? Nightingale added. It's a real senior demon, not some loser on the soul battlefield. I can control the risk. Roland slowed down to consider his countermeasures. If the demon goes into the dreamland with Zoe, it'll appear at a certain place. As long as we send a group of God's punishment witches into the dream world to help me, we'll be able to kill it before it adapts to the new world. More importantly, the dream world is different from the mind resonance. No matter what takes place in that world, it'll never affect the real world. Once I wake up, the time in the dream world will stop and all visitors will be forced out. Given that, even if Zoe's soul is replaced by the demons, I'll be able to get a clear idea of the current situation and come back safely. But, Nightingale bit her lips and turned to look at Anna. Come on, say something to persuade him. I agree with him, Anna said, which was totally beyond the other witches' expectations. Why? Wendy and the other witches were stunned. Because he once did the same for me, Anna replied seriously. If he had listened to the others and hadn't taken the risk to come to my rescue, I would have been hung a long time ago. I can't persuade myself to stop him from venturing to save Zoe. And I believe in his judgment. He knows that he isn't alone anymore. She looked into Roland's eyes while talking and then they smiled at each other tacitly. Alethea remained silent for a long time. I have to thank you on behalf of Zoe, regardless of the outcome. And I would like to hear Zoe express her thanks to me herself. Roland nodded. I'll go and pick out our most capable warriors, Pasha said gratefully. By the way, before we enter the dreamland, please continue the mind resonance. He smirked. Zoe asked us to keep the mind connection going until she gestures a stop. If she's in a fight with the demon in the world of consciousness, she will probably win in the end. Hey, female, guess what your bug friends are going to do? Zoe raised her head to look at the senior demon and then looked at herself. Her chest swelled slightly. Although she was still almost flat-chested, she thought this body looked much better than a rough male body. She could clearly feel her own hands and feet again, but since she hadn't cut her hair for a long time, it covered her forehead now. She felt as if she had somehow entered the dream world. Aha! They must think of you as an enemy and have you surrounded tightly. Caberdabi mocked. After they figure out what has happened, you've a 30% chance of being imprisoned. When that happens, you'll be tied to an iron bed and soaked in your own excretion like a dumb worm. Of course, you've a 70% chance of being executed right away too. After all, it's customary for you to sacrifice some of your own kind to prevent further losses. It's something you always did 400 years ago. Zoe looked around and saw nothing except darkness. She wondered why she could see herself and the demon so clearly in such a dark place. Hey, did I scare you silly? Or, do you think that you can escape from this fight by remaining silent? Caberdabi sounded agitated. My patience is limited. You'd better hurry up and understand the situation you're in. We won't die here, but if you devote all your energy to pleasing me, maybe I'll let you suffer less. I've never expected a demon to talk such a load of crap before a fight. Zoe tore a strip of cloth from her sleeve and used it to tie up her hair. If I were you, I'd never buzz in front of a bug, even if I mastered its language. Keep talking for now. Soon, you'll only be able to scream. The demon sneered. I can feel the power of your soul. It's much stronger than the souls of most bugs. You'll make an excellent opponent for me. It's good to fight you in my last battle. And then? When I'm executed, what will happen to you? Did you pull me into this fight just because you want to vent your anger on me? Yes, that's right. Fight. Kill. Torture. Upgrade. Bug, that's the attitude of an advanced species. Did you expect me to kneel on the ground and beg you for mercy? Caberdabi emitted a long, loud cry. What's so scary about death? My soul will be taken in by the fountain of magic, and when my species reaches the top, my soul will return to the world. You'd better hurry up, Zoe said with a straight face. They'll execute me any minute. Rest assured. Caberdabi grinned grimly. You don't understand the mysteries of magic. In this world of consciousness, time will become sluggish and controllable. Here, you'll feel that the blink of an eye is as long as several years. It's my last battle, so I'll do my best to satisfy myself. Chapter 996, Fight with Pain. A long time. But full of pleasure. She felt as if she had returned to the battlefield from 400 years ago. But this time, she didn't need to worry about the pain of failure or watching her friends die in her arms. She was free from the heavy burden of responsibility. Best of all, both she and the demon could feel pain. The pain made the fighting real. Female. I have to say you've done a good job, Caberdabi said as it threw Zoe's severed arm on the ground. Although you're a bug, you're much stronger than most of your kind. I really didn't pick the wrong person. Your performance pleases me. Really? Zoe answered vaguely, then spat a piece of flesh from her mouth. Unfortunately, your flesh tastes disgusting. Was this the 5th day since the battle began, or the 7th day? It was difficult to estimate the passage of time without the sun, moon, and stars, so she could only roughly estimate it based on her body's natural reactions. Time here should be fixed in a cycle. For example, thirst and hunger would suddenly disappear when they became apparent and then reset. It was sensible to regard this cycle as a day. Otherwise, it would be impossible for people to fight for years. They would lose strength and be unable to move within days. She felt a sharp pain from her arm where it had been cut off. It was obviously an unfair battle. The demon could create a long sword with its magic power, while she only had her arms, legs, and teeth. But Zoe did not care about whether it was fair or not. Because victory or failure was not important. On the battlefield of old, she had to kill the enemy and protect herself, but not here. Here, the severed limbs would regenerate. No matter how severely she was wounded, she would not lose consciousness. Without death, the pain became eternal. It was not necessary to use a sword to cause pain. She noticed that this was the first time that the demon took the initiative to slow down the pace and talk. But your persistence is meaningless, the senior demon said, as it pressed on its wounded shoulder. The bloody wound quickly recovered. Attacks like this are nothing to me. If you want to beat me with your teeth, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. I'll knock out your teeth one by one and then make you swallow them. Get ready for it. But you still feel the pain, don't you? Zoe gasped and watched her arm recover. By the way, I'd like to ask one more thing. Is that pain particularly familiar? Female, what do you mean? No, I have to be patient. I can't let it see my intoxication, as it'll reduce the fun. In spite of this, she still couldn't help chuckling. When you were half dead, you should have felt it every day, she pointed at the shoulder blade, being stabbed here and having your flesh cut away. With how much your body was shaking, you must have felt not so good. Ah, I forgot to tell you. The person who cared for you along the way was me. Bug. Caberdabi was furious and lifted his sword, snarling, I'll crush you. The 16th day, or maybe longer. The dark ground was covered with blood, mostly reddish-brown, and some black-blue. In addition, broken limbs, internal organs, and of course, teeth, were scattered everywhere. Although the lost parts would regenerate before long, the blood and scattered parts would not disappear. In this environment, they accidentally slipped again and again. But because of this, Zoe got 2 weapons, one of her thigh bones and half of the demon's spine. The former was like a short hammer, and the latter could be used as a sword. As long as they didn't directly hit the demon's magic sword, they were quite useful to her. 400 years was long enough to make her an expert in all kinds of weapons. And her favorite place to attack was still its shoulder. Pain was sometimes unrelated to the size of the wound. If you're tired, you might take a break now, Zoe said, hanging the spine around her waist and moving her numb wrists. After all, you have to torture me for a long time. It would be better to take your time. The demon did not respond for the first time. Its chest heaved as it was breathing deeply, and its scarlet eyes stared at the extraordinary. The initial contempt faded from its human-like face. Their relative strength had not changed. The various abilities of a senior demon had ensured its superior position in this fight. Zoe needed to pay several times the cost in order to strike her opponent. Once she made a mistake, she would suffer for a long time. It was not unusual that her fingers were broken and her belly was torn apart. Even so, the atmosphere gradually changed. Zoe did not take any notice of its silence. Let me ask. Is this space created by you? The demon probably needed to rest for a moment. Cabradabi slowly said, this is a stream of consciousness, a combination of magic power and a soul. It doesn't need anyone to create it. It's hard to understand for a bug like you. Almost no one has a chance to enter the stream of consciousness. I've seen a bigger one, which was as complete as a real world, she interrupted. There were trees, sky, and earth. It's not like here. There is nothing here. Nonsense, female, the demon roared, you have no idea how much magic power it consumes to construct entities in the stream of consciousness, let alone a complete world. Only the fountain of magic can do that. It's the fountain of magic again. It's just like the domain of deities, an illusion. No one has been there, but they talk as if they've seen it. Zoe took off the spine bone and held it with her hand. This is engraved in the heritage. But you would know nothing about it. Then can you elaborate further and come up with some evidence to convince me? Female, do you think I'm a fool? Cabradabi was furious. How can I, Lord Cabradabi, be deceived by such a clumsy technique? Before it finished its words, a spear pierced through its head. The white spear was the spine thrown by Zoe. Since you don't want to say anything, then that's the end of the rest. When you want to talk about it, we'll take a rest again. She held the thigh bone and rushed toward the staggering demon. Dozens of days later. Why? Asked Cabradabi, who had completely lost its original momentum. It held its magic sword in front of its chest, staring at Zoe as if she were a monster. Don't you fear pain? The war 400 years ago made me accustomed to it, while hibernating for 400 years made me forget it. If you regained something which had always accompanied you, would you fear it? Zoe raised her lips. At this moment, she no longer had to conceal herself. In fact, I have to thank you. You've compensated for the feelings which King Roland can't give me. You are crazy. This is only a brief moment compared to hundreds of years. Now, it's your turn to please me. When Zoe once again stabbed her fingers into the demon's chest, the sight in front of her suddenly twisted. The blood, flesh, and body parts all turned into nothingness, and a strong sensation of dizziness overwhelmed her. When she opened her eyes again, she saw the hall dome of Third Border City. Chapter 997, Suppression. She woke up. Zoe heard a cry of astonishment and then saw several sharp swords held to her neck. Don't move. Alethia's voice also appeared in her mind, you'd better stay still until we confirm who you are. So that was why, she noticed that her hands and feet were tied with iron locks, and she was lying on the stone bed where the demon originally was. Her partners were wielding swords, standing guard around her. She thought, this is indeed a wise decision. It's quite necessary to confine me before they're clear whether it's me or the demon who occupies the shell of the god's punishment soldier. They did not ask for my identity. Instead, they decided to make the judgment by themselves, which is a mature decision. After all, since the demon has occupied my body, any answer might be a lie. If Cabradabi did not make it up, the dozens of days in the dark stream of consciousness was equivalent to only a few minutes in reality. It must have been Alethea who made the correct judgments and took countermeasures in such a short period of time. With such partners, I really have nothing to worry about. When Zoe was about to close her eyes and leave it to them, what she saw in the crowd made her frown. What are they doing? She saw another stone bed beneath the magic core. Though she could not see who was lying on it, the answer was almost self-evident as the witches were crowding beside it. She soon came up with a possibility. Do they plan to confirm my identity through King Roland's dream world? No, no one here can force Roland to do it. If it's real, then it can only have been prompted by himself. But, this is too inappropriate. How can Alethea agree with this plan? Doesn't she know what the mortal king means to the gods' punishment witches? What's more, according to the demon's words, their understanding of magic power is far better than ours. If the dream world is also built by magic power, then it's a risky move to allow a senior demon into it. I shouldn't have praised her. Thinking of this, Zoe could no longer keep quiet. She cried, "Wait. Don't open the dream world. I'm Zoe." Alethea took a look at her but didn't respond. Listen, Caberdabi can revise the effect of magic power to a certain extent. If you let it enter the dream world, we don't know what will happen. Wake His Majesty up. Quickly. Oh? Really? To be honest, lying on that stone board is chilling. If I don't put a quilt on it, I really can't fall asleep. But if you were the demon, you could also say that. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoed behind her. Zoe tried to raise her neck and look backward. Then she saw a gray-haired man. It was Roland Wimbledon, the mortal king. She immediately felt relieved. It turns out that he has not yet lied on it. Great. For some reason, her senseless body felt a hint of warmth and satisfaction, as if it were no longer empty, though she did not know how to describe it. Compared with the pain which reminded her the suffering she'd been through, this completely different feeling made her feel calm and contented. Zoe lightly sighed and said, "Indeed, if the demon occupied this body, it might see this information. So my method is very simple. Just let Ms. Camilla reconnect the demon and me. I did notice a soul movement just now, so I suspended the mind resonance." Noticing everyone staring at her, Camilla Derry hesitatingly replied, "But I can't tell which soul belongs to the demon." "Are you sure that you want to enter the mind resonance state?" Roland asked. "Yes, Your Majesty. There isn't a third soul here. Once it admits, you'll know the truth." "Make the demon admit?" The crowd did not know how to respond. "No matter what happens, it won't get worse anyway," Pasha said. "It doesn't matter if you try. If Zoe is on the other side, I'll be able to tell." In that case, Roland looked around and quickly made a decision. Connect them again. The familiar sensation quickly enveloped her. Zoe directly transmitted her thoughts to Caberdabi's mind. "I said before. I won't stop until I'm satisfied. Female, don't be too proud." Almost at the same time, she heard the angry voice of the demon. "If you don't want to talk about this, then I'll change a topic. You should know what I am thinking now?" "Well, why should I admit? Use your own method to tell." The demon sneered, "I would like to see how you'll distinguish between different souls without knowledge of the stream of consciousness." "If you don't say it, then I'll just go directly," Zoe said carelessly. Wait. What does that mean?" "Of course, going to your side. I can use the resonance channel to transfer my soul and enter the stream of consciousness. I suddenly realize I can also do that. Though you keep saying we're bugs, actually, the extraordinaries are similarly sensitive to the flow of magic power. Even if I can't explain it, I can try to imitate it." She chuckled and said, "Do you remember what I said before? If you don't tell me, then it's the end of your rest." The voice of Caberdabi suddenly changed. "No, female, I mean, wait. Even if you transfer again, it doesn't matter. I can still catch you easily. After all, there are just 2 shells." Zoe said carelessly, "Well, this time it'll be far more than a few dozen days. Are you ready?" Mind resonance did not mean you couldn't lie, especially when one side was in a weak situation. When the demon felt her overwhelming evil intent, it finally closed its mouth. A moment later, it grinned, using the shell of the crippled god's punishment soldier. Though it sounded a bit panicky, it still tried its best to bluff. Enough. You bugs, how dare you to force Lord Caberdabi? But it can't be helped, this time, I'll concede that to you. Keep quiet. Don't scare His Majesty, Zoe said unhappily through her consciousness. Ahem, female, the demon was choked by her words, you're trampling on the dignity of the senior race. You've had enough rest? It glared at the extraordinary hatefully and decided to swallow what it wanted to say. It lowered its voice and said bitterly, don't think that you can always win. Wars like this are just trivial setbacks for us. You low-grade bugs, you have no idea what's on the other side of the mainland. The army of Sky Sea Realm is engulfing the land little by little, trying to turn the whole world into an abyss. If it were not to stop them, you, with such poor power, would have been crushed into ashes by us 400 years ago. Chapter 998, A Real Strong Power. Translator, Trans-En Editor, Trans-En. What Caberdabi said made everyone frown. According to it, demons were waging war on two fronts and the enemy that humanity had never even met was their chief opponent. That meant, during the previous battles of divine will, the demons had only sent a small part of their army to battle humanity. Knowing this, Roland and the witches, who had been quite confident about the war, started to feel less optimistic. There were 4 species depicted in the giant paintings in the Divine Land and the underground civilization had already been eliminated. Given that, Roland speculated that the so-called Sky Sea Realm was the homeland of the species in the 4th picture. It was the most mysterious among the 4 and was a portrait of some deep-sea eyeballs. Did demons wage a war against the monsters in the sea right after they defeated the underground civilization and seized its relic? And they simultaneously managed to crack down on mankind in the Land of Dawn. If it's true, it's no wonder that the senior demon showed utter contempt for the witches. As for the common people without any magic power, Caberdabi probably thinks of us as nothing more than useless weeds. On the other hand, Roland was clear that the demon might have lied to them. Caberdabi was an unyielding fighter. It had led its troop to penetrate deep into the artillery squad and had utilized the mind resonance to invade Zoe's body. Obviously, it knew how to mask its intentions and to never give up fighting, even in the face of great adversity. Since no one was able to check whether it was lying, it might have been bluffing, trying to incite panic. Everyone looked grave. Roland knew that he needed to bring this situation back under his control as soon as possible. He shrugged and pretended to feel at ease. He looked at Alethea. So, this handicapped warrior is the demon? Yeah, I guess so. I don't know how Zoe did this, but she'd never say anything like that, Alethea replied. Good, you saved me the trouble of taking a nap. Roland nodded to Zoe. You can eat whatever you want in tonight's trip to the Dreamland. Thank you, Your Majesty. Zoe's lips could not help curling into a smile, but soon her expression returned to normal. Unfortunately, this guy is already accustomed to our way of thinking. Although it's still unable to flexibly control the body, we can't read his real thoughts through mind resonance that easily now. It's not your fault. After all, no one has pried deeply into a senior demon's mind before. It's natural for you to misjudge the situation. Demon? You still call us by such a ridiculous name. Caberdabi sniggered. You look upon the other species as evil incarnate without realizing that you yourselves are nothing but backward barbarians. Your good days will end soon. When the fountain of magic appears again, you'll die out. All the people looked at each other simultaneously, since the fountain of magic mentioned by the demon reminded them of a thing in their legend. Is the fountain of magic the bloody moon? Asked Roland. You bugs always see the surface. The senior demon did not give him a definite answer. Is the red sphere made of magic power? Agatha interjected. But that wouldn't make sense. I've seen the red moon with my own eyes. No matter what it is, it's way too far away from us. You said the final winner would open the door to the fountain of magic. It's impossible unless you can build a ladder to the heavens. Caberdabi snorted and turned its head away without explaining anything. Where's the Sky-Sea realm? The demon refused to respond. Did you destroy the underground civilization? The demon still remained silent. Is your new technology part of the inheritance of the underground civilization? I mean the deformed creature that is capable of growing out black pillars? Save it, bug. Caberdabi finally opened its mouth to speak. I've already told you all that I can say. As for the things that I can't say, you'll never force me to tell you, even if you send this female to. The demon paused for a while and glanced at Zoe. I won't give you any more information. If you want to kill me, you'd better hurry up. Otherwise, you'll be eliminated by Emperor Hecht Zod. And I, Caberdabi, will be reborn in the Fountain of Magic. Now that the interrogation had hit a bottleneck, Roland decided to stop questioning the senior demon and leave it to the tequila witches. He believed that they would be able to get it to talk someday, for its soul had already been transferred into a disabled god's punishment warrior. With this thought in mind, Roland said with his hands laid out, "You don't want to talk about sensitive things, so how about we change the subject? You said that your last defeat was just a trivial setback for your army, so how powerful are you? What about the army of the Sky-Sea realm? Are they stronger than you? And you mentioned the Sky Lord just now. I want to know how powerful the Lord is. Is he a match for a transcendent? These things aren't confidential, are they?" Given the demon's character, Roland was confident that it would never miss such a perfect opportunity to boast of their strength. "Oh, bug," as Roland had expected, Caberdabi said loudly. "I can tell you. Our power is far beyond your imagination. Do you know why we call you bugs? It's because the difference between an advanced race and a backward species is like that between birds and bugs. It's determined by the nature of magic power. At the other end of this continent, on the border of our territory and the Sky-Sea realm, our soldiers are countless. When we march together, the mountains tremble. Our enemies from the Sky-Sea realm are as strong as us. Otherwise, how could you have survived until now?" Caberdabi paused for a moment and then continued. "As for the transcendents, if you're referring to the most powerful females, they could have been counted as the Sky Lord's rivals in the past, but now, the Lord has enhanced its strength and become a prudent and smart commander. If it had led the army in the last battle to fight you, it would have been able to drain the blood from all of you by itself. Bug, when you hear that the Sky Lord is coming, you'd better kneel down and beg for mercy. This way, you can die faster and suffer less." Roland automatically dismissed the demon's exaggeration and captured several implicit clues in its words. For the demon army, logistics is always a major obstacle to their movement. Without red mist, they can't go anywhere. Therefore, such a large demon army must fight close to their black stone tablets. Surprisingly, the army from the Sky-Sea realm can combat the demons in the red mist and drag the demon army's main forces into a quagmire of war. That means, they aren't just as strong as the demons. The senior demon apparently doesn't want to talk too much about this matter, which suggests about its attitude toward the Sky Lord and its army. In addition, it never called the enemies from the Sky-Sea realm bugs or worms, which means that the sea monsters have already upgraded themselves. Here's a glaring contradiction. The senior demon claims that they are also an advanced race, but up until now, we've only known of one race in the Battle of Divine Will getting eliminated. Wait a moment, Caberdabi never said that demons wiped out the underground civilization. It just said that each species had to go to the Sky-Sea realm to get a shard. Something is missing here. When the senior demon was still crowing about how mighty its race was, Roland interrupted it. "In fact, you don't know true power." Caberdabi pulled a long face. "Bug, what do you know? A real, strong power won't bring darkness to the world. Instead, it'll dispel the myth, be willing to burn itself to illuminate and warm the world, just like the sun." "What, exactly are you talking about?" "It's simple." Roland cleared his throat. "You guys are so powerful, so why don't you light the fire?" The demon seemed at a loss when Roland stood up and left with the witches. He walked toward the gate leading out of the hall, back straight, without looking back. Chapter 999, Witness the Glory. Roland and the witches were having a meeting in the castle's conference hall in Neverwinter. Everyone looked worried, especially Agatha and Phyllis. They could not feel good after hearing so many subversive ideas about the demons and the world itself from Caberdabi. In this war that had lasted for hundreds of years, thousands of people had been killed. Human beings had already lost the vast majority of their territory and shrunk into a corner of the Land of Dawn. Now, the witches had discovered that mankind was not demons' rival. On the other side of the continent, there was a place called Sky Sea Realm, and the monsters from that place were as strong as demons. They entangled the main forces of demons and thus gave human beings an opportunity to survive. It was a terrible blow to the faith of the Tequila witches. Seeing the grim-faced ancient witches, the members of the Witch Union and Sleeping Spell also felt oppressed by worry. In the previous battle, they had taken the initiative to attack the demons' outpost and had achieved a remarkable victory with little cost. It was the most splendid record in this war for human beings. Nevertheless, lots of serendipitous stuff had come into play in this battle. The demons had not had a clear idea of their opponent, and the First Army had happened to see through their trap. Thus, they took this chance to defeat the demons using the combat mode that they were best at. That meant this success could not be copied. If casualties increased significantly during the war, human beings who had already lost lots of land and population would have a slim hope of winning the battle of divine will. Perhaps Caberdabi just made up a story to deceive us, said Wendy, who felt that she needed to say something to boost everyone's morale. After all, no one has ever been to the other side of the continent. Who knows if it's true or not? I think we'd better not think too much before we can confirm it. How about you? No one answered. Agatha cast a thankful gaze at Wendy. Although Caberdabi might have exaggerated the facts purposely, I don't think it was lying, especially when it just woke up after the soul transfer. At that time it could hardly control its body, let alone weigh every word before saying them out. Zoe should be able to feel it as well. The things it mentioned at the beginning turned out to be consistent with the story it told us later. To act so naturally in front of us, it had to prepare the story in advance and train itself for a long time. Could it possibly do that there? So, you mean it told us the truth about the legacy shard? Scroll asked, with a thoughtful expression on her face. Yes. If I understand Caberdabi correctly, it told us that any species could upgrade themselves with the legacy shard, namely the relics of gods. Agatha explained slowly. If demons are able to defeat us once and for all, why didn't they try their best to destroy us and seize our relic? There's only one explanation. They really can't. Many people agreed with Agatha on this point. During the first battle of Divine Will, when demons had been uncivilized barbarians, the human kingdoms failed to unite together to fight the enemy. The battle had lasted for decades, and during that period of time, the underground civilization had tried to make contact with mankind. During the second battle of Divine Will, when the bloody moon had come to the world for the second time, demons had become much stronger and had successfully driven the Union out of the fertile plains. If the upgrade could bring significant advantage to demons, they should have done their best to eliminate human beings and seize their relic as soon as possible. We really underestimated demons, said Phyllis, who was overwhelmed with remorse. For the past 400 years, the Union just focused on our familiar places in the Land of Dawn without paying any attention to the world outside. Now, we know little about the other side of the continent, let alone the Sky Sea Realm. Oh? What does the other side of this continent look like? Roland asked curiously. I've only read about it in some ancient books. It's said to be an extremely barren land of numerous mountains and cliffs. Its average altitude is much higher than the Land of Dawn, Phyllis recalled. Tens of kilometers across the sea, there's another continent, but actually these two continents are connected by a lofty mountain range which is surrounded by the sea. Only when the tides are low can one see the mountain. Most of the time, the tides are high and half of the mountain is submerged in the sea. According to the legend, demons came to the Land of Dawn through this mountain. Wait, it sounds familiar. I think I've heard it from. Roland touched his chin and wondered. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning flashed across his mind. The ancient witch's description reminded Roland of Thunder's findings in the Shadow Waters, which included a seaside plateau, a vast cliff and a huge stone gate embedded in the cliff, though Phyllis did not mention a gate like that. Did Thunder's exploration team somehow see the continent opposite to the Land of Dawn? Roland thought. That's interesting. More than half of the Land of Dawn lies to the northwest of Neverwinter, but the Shadow Sea is located in the east. How could the exploration team see the undiscovered continent opposite to the Land of Dawn through a telescope? As long as this planet is a sphere, they could at most see the sky above that continent no matter how advanced the telescope is. How come they could directly observe such a faraway land? Something must be wrong here. He noticed that Tilly, a member of Thunder's exploration team, was looking at him contemplatively. Obviously, she also thought of the wonders she had seen in the underwater stone tower in the Shadow Islands ruins. Roland wondered. The building on the Shadow Islands isn't constructed by the Union, but it's apparently a watchtower overseeing the continent which is deemed to be the homeland of demons. Who's the owner of the building? For my country and my people, I have to figure it out and thoroughly investigate the Shadow Islands ruins. I must give this mission to Thunder before he goes to the sea. Instead of having a quick glance at the place, he needs to carefully look into this problem this time. Your Majesty? Roland had been deeply absorbed in thoughts for a long time. When he heard someone calling him, he stopped wondering and found that Agatha was looking at him sympathetically. Are you all right? I was just thinking about something. He waved his hand. Please don't worry too much. I know this news causes stress for you, but we still have hope, the Ice Witch said in a soft voice. When I just woke up from the frozen coffin, you told me human beings were going to defeat demons. Now, I still firmly believe it, even if it requires hard work of several generations. Yes, Phyllis echoed this sentiment. We are so close to the Tequila ruins now. Once we destroy the demons' base there, they won't get the opportunity to build obelisks and will have to wait at least another 400 years to eliminate us. Even if human beings lose the war in the end, it's not your fault. Actually, you've done much better than the three chiefs. Roland blinked his eyes in astonishment. He realized that he must have been frowning when he had been thinking about the Shadow Islands ruins, and his facial expression had made the witches believe that he was terrified by Kabardabi's story. He found the witches were just trying to comfort and encourage him. He could not help shaking his head and chuckled. It's the worst situation, curling up in a corner all my life and leaving the problem to our later generations. That's not my plan. After all, I probably can't live that long. I'm more interested in defeating all the competitors and solving the mystery by myself. It's such great fun, isn't it? Your Majesty, most of the witches seemed confused except Anna, who looked at Roland smilingly. Since you guys still remember, I said that human beings were going to defeat demons. Roland looked at Phyllis. Do you still remember another thing I mentioned? A real strong power won't bring darkness to the world. Instead, it'll dispel the myth and be willing to burn itself to light up and warm the world. I wasn't joking with Kabardabi. Roland did not give the witches any time to respond and continued. Faced with a mighty power like the sun, everything, including demons, will be burnt to cinders. You'll be able to witness such a power together with me. Chapter 1000, Sisters. A fire was blazing merrily in a stove, casting a ruddy glow over the floor of the room. Ozima felt warm in her house. She watched snowflakes drifting in the north wind outside the window while listening to the crackling of the flames in the fireplace. In the past, when winter had come, she would have suffered severe frostbite on her hands and her hand skin would have chapped very easily. It was a memory from her childhood. Back then, she had had to rummage through rubbish in search of food every winter. After moving to the sleeping island, her hands got even worse because of the long-term exposure to salty seawater. After all these years, she was already accustomed to the pain of frostbite. For her, it was nothing compared to the misery of being a tramp on the streets. However, right now, there were only a few shallow cracks on her fingers. She did not feel any pain or see any blood in them. She enjoyed this pain-free winter. She had not had such a comfortable experience for years. She came to understand that the living environment of Neverwinter was exceptionally good and even ordinary houses were much better here than their counterparts in other towns. For example, a thick mortar was applied to both sides of the walls of this brick house and each corner of the window was closely connected to the bricks. No matter how strong the snowstorm was outside, the people inside the house would never be affected. Without such a sturdy house, the fire could hardly warm up the whole room. If Azima was now in an ordinary residence of Valencia, she would hear a whistle of a wind blowing through cracks of the door and the window and many other clefts in the house. In addition, there was a tunnel inside the fireplace, which was connected to the bedroom adjoining this living room. With such a heat supply pipeline, the bed would be warm when she and her sisters put out the fire and went to bed at night. And those designs were only a small part of the new things she discovered in Neverwinter. Similar details were everywhere in this city. The longer she lived here, the more she wondered. Maybe they didn't build this city to survive at this place. They built it this way in order to enjoy their lives. As for why they built it in the western region, the highest hit area during the months of demons, it must be because of the strong contrast. In a place where all year is springtime, one would not feel anything special in a warm room. By contrast, in a place of ice and snow, one would be deeply impressed and satisfied by the warmth. They must think that only a seemingly impossible thing is worth doing and take pride in such an achievement. For a moment, she really believed this speculation. The soup is ready. Let's have dinner. Doris walked out of the kitchen while holding a pot of soup and then she placed it on the low table in the living room. Thank you. Azima handed a cushion to Doris and then sat down at the table. There were 2 dishes and 1 soup. All of them used bird beak mushrooms as the main ingredient. These fleshy and juicy mushrooms were a specialty of the western region. They were tasty and easy to cook. They only needed a little salt instead of lots of seasonings and they did not require a special cooking method. More importantly, they were the least expensive ingredient in Neverwinter and were as cheap as wheat. I bought a lot of mushrooms at a clearance sale and stored them in our room, said Doris, happily. Even if we can't find enough food in the winter, these mushrooms will be enough for us to fill our stomachs until the spring, though they may become less tasty after a long time. Azima scooped up some soup with her spoon. Under the reflection of the fire, the oil floating on the soup's surface shone with a golden color and looked quite alluring. When she put a spoon into her mouth, she felt its aroma fill her mouth instantly. After that, the warm soup flowed down all the way into her stomach and warmed her entire abdomen. The soup was as delicious as before, but now she had no appetite. After taking 2 spoonfuls of the soup, Azima put down her small bowl. Is there anything wrong? Doris quickly noticed that Azima seemed to be a little different today. I'm wondering whether my decision was wrong. After a long silence, Azima whispered. It's my own decision to leave Neverwinter, but because of it, everyone lost the chance of having a better life together with their families in this city. If White Pear didn't quit her job in the sleeping spell, she would now live in a big house equipped with a heating system instead of this small house that doesn't allow us to go about freely in our daily life. Why did you suddenly say that? Doris was stunned and then soothed Azima. No matter how small our house is, it's able to shelter us from wind and rain. When their relatives have enough money to pay the minimum down payment, they will move out. It's not as good as the house of the sleeping spell, but I think it's already good enough for 2 people to live in. Think about our old days on the streets. But it's different now. Azima interrupted Doris anxiously. Azima had been feeling frustrated recently. She overestimated her personal ability and failed to assess the situation correctly. In the past, she had led her sisters to search for food in rubbish and snatch food from jaws of wild dogs, but now she refused to do anything like that. She did not want to give Tilly and her witches any chance to laugh at them, even though her sisters might not mind leading such a life. She had submitted lots of job applications to the city hall like ordinary residents of the city, but none of them got approved. Literacy was a key requirement in the job descriptions of most positions, and well-paid jobs usually demanded a primary education diploma. She could not meet those requirements and wanted to work in some construction projects or in the furnace area, but the Ministry of Construction and the Ministry of Industry only recruited adult males. The city hall clerk told her that she should go to school to finish her studies first if she wanted to get a promising career. Among the 6 sisters, only Doris and White Pear had jobs. The former was employed by the witch union. She further processed Mystery Moon's magnetized copper rods with her enchantment and earned about 30 or 40 silver royals a day, almost as much as the witches living in the castle. But it was just a part-time job. Sometimes, she only worked 1 day in a week. White Pear worked in a tailor's shop as an ordinary worker. Considering she did not have to use her magic power in this position, she earned the average salary. According to the number of her working days, she usually earned 15 or 20 silver royals a month. The other sisters were also unemployed just like Ozima. In other words, Doris and White Pear had to afford the living expenses of the 6 sisters. For this reason, Ozima felt guilty for the cozy life she had now. She had firmly refused Wendy's invitation because she wanted to prove to Nightingale that she was not a weak person and could live on her own without relying on the sleeping spell. She felt embarrassed by the current situation. That was why she sounded so impatient when talking to Doris. She felt regret right as soon as she interrupted Doris. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's okay." Doris held Ozima's hands. "I know how you feel and I want to tell you it wasn't your own decision to leave the sleeping spell. We also agreed with you. It's not your fault. As for the living expenses, please don't mind it. You've done so much for us and now it's time for us to pay you back. You don't owe me a thing. I helped you without expecting to receive anything in return. That's the same for us. See what I mean?" Doris blinked and said. But Ozima did not know what to say at this moment since she was moved deeply by Doris' honesty and sincerity. She had not felt so touched for many years and could not adapt to it at the moment, but she soon managed to control herself and reminded herself that as the leader of the sisters, she should never mention those stupid things again. At this moment, someone knocked on the door. "Who's it?" She hurriedly turned her head, pulled her hands back and stood up, trying to cover her feelings. "It's me, Wendy," the person outside answered. "His Majesty wants to talk to you."